The girl says that His Majesty the King promised that he would be crown prince. The boy says he owes her his life, addressing her by her first name. Daphne has worked hard for so many years for this while remaining in his shadow. The girl replies that he is wrong about her, encouraging him to have a further unpleasant conversation. Daphne has worked hard while remaining in his shadow. Thanks to Daphne, they could live happily ever after. The girl turned to the white-haired girl, calling her Flora. The girl with pink hair realized that tomorrow the story will have a happy ending. In a past life, Daphne had read this novel, so she knows. The eldest Prince Alan is the main character in the story. He will inherit the throne. After that, he has a long road of development ahead of him. Then he will propose marriage to the protagonist Flora. He proposes to live happily ever after together. She'll nod and say in a voice shaking with happiness that she's been waiting a long time for this. That's the happy ending. This way, Daphne will avoid a horrible death, as in the original story, and she will be able to live happily ever after. A freedom she hadn't seen in her past life. It would be hers, even if it only existed in a novel. So she reasoned, but the building was on fire, and Daphne sat outside, not realizing why she was going through all this.
The locket glows red. Beatrice, triumphant, runs away.
Daphne realized he was losing consciousness. Just one day until the happy ending, but everything was turned upside down. It cost her a great effort the happiness she had experienced in this life, and now, the girl saw her brother, who was standing opposite her. Turns out it's not Beatrice. It's a girl in her body who has been in a car accident, but instead of dying, she finds herself in a novel she recently read, of which Beatrice is a character. She did her job perfectly. The girl began to scream, saying she would never betray him. She wished only happiness for her and Flora. He only kicked her, causing her to fall to the ground. Afterwards, he said that when he became crown prince, he would not need anyone alive. Not her, not Kale, not Claire. There's no room in his kingdom for other pretenders to the throne. But Daphne needn't fear. She won't see Claire die. The only one to blame is Daphne herself, her and her naivety. She said she never claimed the throne. She screamed that it was a misunderstanding, begged him to stop and listen to her. If Flora found out about it, it would break her heart. The guy said it was Flora who suggested killing Daphne. She totally agrees with him on that. The girl didn't realize what her mistake was. She sincerely wished these two to be happy, and tried for it. She helped them to be happy, and she herself could be free and happy. This is the second time she's died like this. She doesn't want a repeat of what happened in her first life. She had loved ones then, and she thought they loved her, but they all betrayed her. She didn't understand why it was repeating itself here. She thought Alan and Flora wouldn't betray her, but that's exactly what they did. The girl woke up in bed with tears in her eyes. She realized that the manor was not on fire and she was in her chambers, but Alan had just killed her. There was no pain. She realized that the manor was not on fire and she felt weak in her body, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Daphne realized she was 13 years old. The only thing that remained unclear was how she'd survived. She'd just been dead. When she was that age, the story hadn't even started yet.
Of course she doesn't want that fate. Her father doesn't give up and still tries to sell her no matter what. Her father doesn't give.
The only way to survive is to hold on to one of the main characters, but she bet on the wrong people and was betrayed again. She doesn't understand why she's back so early this time, but it doesn't matter. What mattered was that Alan had deceived her, and everyone she trusted had betrayed her. Their smiles seemed sincere to her, gave her hope. All the people from her past life, Alan, Flora, Daphne didn't understand how they could have abandoned her. The girl promised that she would make Alan feel what she felt. To get revenge on him, she would need the help of many people. Those who hate the king and all his kind. She can't find help among the common people.
He's surprised. She admits that she thinks the idea is crazy herself.
Those who hate the king. She can't find help among the common people.
He's surprised. She admits that she thinks the idea is crazy herself.
Those who hate the king. Daphne can't just walk up to them and say hello. They won't listen to a commoner. We'll have to wait for Elmiller to become more humble. All that knowledge wouldn't help her. She wondered who could help her in this situation. She remembered that there was indeed someone suitable, and he was not of royal blood. This man was her and Alan's enemy in the story, a vengeful devil and a rebel against royalty. He hates the royal family as much as she does now. Archduke Kyle Bertrand, a scoundrel who took his own mother's life to take her place. Lord of the cold, demon-infested northern lands. He's only 15 years old, and there are already so many terrible rumors about him. The only thing that turned out to be untrue was that he drank blood instead of water. She wished he wouldn't betray her and help her a little. Then they would get rid of Alan together. She would do anything to make them suffer.
Our heroine herself does not believe that everything went according to plan. Gloatingly, mentally says goodbye to the Viscount's family. She plans to divorce Ruslan in a year and live happily abroad.
A fever that made her unable to even get out of bed. When she saw that Daphne was on her feet and looked quite well, she asked if the young lady was lying. Dropping the vial, she said that she had traveled a long time to get the medicine, so she should thank her. Now Daphne began to remember. This maid's name is Maria Liber. The position of her maid was unwanted by many, not out of dislike, nor out of pity. Commoners who became nobles were repugnant to servants. When the young Daphne was introduced to Marielle, the woman told her to enjoy life, because not every simpleton like her suddenly gets a title. In public, the woman behaved impeccably, like a caring and kind servant. At the manor, she was constantly scolding her. The woman said that the girl had to listen to her, otherwise no one would see her as an aristocrat. It was not written in the story, but she learned it by bitter experience.
She sees in her mind the Duke and the girl under this tunnel. He asks her to come closer, to smell the scent of wisteria.
This pissed off the maid, after which she pulled the young lady back, asking her what she was doing. The girl only wondered what the woman would say this time. Daphne called the maid by her name, which pissed her off even more. The woman began to shout, saying that she was allowing herself to be rude by calling her by her name, for she was Mrs. Liebert to Daphne. The girl only asked why not, if the woman was dressed like a maid. Maybe she was her maid. Angry, Marielle said that my lady hadn't gotten a beating in a long time, so she would beat her to make her wake up. Taking the rope, she told her to be patient and learn, for the king and queen would never recognize her.
She has no choice but to go inside because she has nowhere else to go. She knocks on the door, but it opens by itself.
For the king and queen. Marielle didn't understand how the young lady knew about it. The girl said she knew a lot of things and could tell the emperor. The maid is not stupid, she needs to use her brain. If Daphne tells about the theft, the king will be angry with her. The girl wondered if the maid would lose her head after such a thing. She realized that if the girl exposed the maid, she would only be praised, because she would immediately point out where the emperor's gold had gone. About the king and queen's recognition, there was no need to worry. Daphne's not interested, but if she sacrificed Marielle, their relationship would be a little better. After saying that, the girl thanked the maid. Sitting down on the floor, the woman clutched her head. She begged not to tell anything to the emperor. The young lady realized that once she knew what Alan was up to, she would get rid of Marielle. Daphne said she would keep it a secret, but in return, she would listen to her in everything. The maid had to agree. She said she would do whatever she was told. The girl said she was hungry, and Marielle should get her something, as she was already fainting. The maid bowed and said she would take care of it.
The man notices that she is awake and apologizes that they have not had time to finish preparations for Beatrice's reception at the castle. He introduces himself as Edward, the butler.
The maid asked how she knew he was coming. Daphne said he was the only one who had protested against the tax bill at the government meeting. His Majesty didn't like it, so he intends to kill the Earl, but she will change his mind. That was the plot. She needs to save the Count. He's the key to her plan. Count Koman is coming to talk to the Emperor about the bill. So Marielle needs to wait for the Count in the garden on the way to the audience chamber, then take him to Daphne. The maid didn't understand how she knew. Only members of the royal family and the high society know about this meeting. Stepping out from behind the column, Marielle turned to the Count. A man of honor, he was known since the reign of the previous king for not being shy about telling the truth. Bowing, the servant said that her mistress asked him for an urgent visit. The Count thought that if the mistress was asking, she was from the royal family. The man agreed. The woman said to follow her. Daphne already has a faithful maid named Marielle, and she could greatly use the favor of so important a man as the Earl of Koman. Seeing the man, she addressed him as his lordship. Bowing, he said he was honored to meet her, Her Highness Princess Daphne. She was surprised that he recognized her. She knew there were only 2 children his age in the royal family, His Highness and Prince Claire. Indeed, she would need to speak to His Highness. It was not befitting for a princess to look like she did. Daphne asked if the man was going to the king. The man said he was, but he didn't understand how she knew. The woman said she knew he had been voting against the tax bill for years, so she asked him to change his position this time. He's not going to change anything on his own. The man said he would never go for that. As long as at least one member of the council was against it, this bill would not be passed. Still, he asked who told the princess about it. The girl said it was a secret. Then she explained that if the only canary that sings in the forest is killed by a hunter, the forest will fall into silence. She asked if the Count understood her. The man asked if the king intended to kill him and his entire family over taxes. Daphne confirmed the Count's speculation by saying that he was going against the king's will, because it must be known that His Majesty has already prepared arrows for the canary. The man said it was some kind of nightmare. Today is the last chance to avert his doom. Daphne understood that he was distraught because he realized that there was no longer a shred of honor at court as there had been under the former king. He had been betrayed. She understands his feelings. Unfortunately, there is something else. The girl began to narrate. The king intends to betroth the man's daughter to Archduke Bertrand. Her honor will be violated and she will be killed. That is the king's will. The man clutched his head, saying he would not give his daughter to a painful death. Daphne backed him up, telling him not to give it away. If he did as she said, it wouldn't happen. Turning around, the girl asked this time to change her position on the tax bill so that it would pass. The man said that if taxes were raised, the people would suffer, and the girl herself was from the people. Turning around, she said he has only 2 choices. 1, he submits to the will of the king. 2, he continues to resist and is killed. There's no third way. She hopes he'll make the right choice. He's not the only one who's going to die. She wouldn't want that. Exhaling, he asked why she was giving him such secrets. She said they all have their own goals. By going along with the king, he will thwart his plans. And when he raises the question of whom to marry Archduke Bertrand, she asks him to recommend her. The Count says she is about to embark on a very dangerous path. Daphne explained that she just wanted to live freely. She has the same fate here as at the Archduke's. She will either starve to death here, or, when she is older, she will be sold into slavery to foreigners. She asked me not to worry about her. His daughter won't have to fight for the inheritance, but if she married, she would not have to. The Count thanked her for this information, saying he would recommend her when the time was right. Just have to let him think about it. He needs some time. She said she didn't insist, and now she had to bow out. After saying goodbye, she left. It seemed to her that the man was shocked. In any case, he would soon realize that she was right, and he would be grateful to her. That would make him her first ally. A month later. The carriage in which Daphne was traveling arrived at the Earl of Koman's domain. Upon meeting him, the girl said he told her that he said he wanted to give her something. When she saw the Count's condition, she asked what had happened to make him so thin. He only said that she had been right when he raised the question of the Archduke's marriage. The king wanted to appoint his daughter, and then he recommended Daphne. He assumed that the girl was already aware. She confirmed his words by saying that the brothers had already told her that she would go to Bertrand. The man assumed that the brothers were worried about her. Daphne knew that was by no means the case. The brothers regarded this with annoyance. The man continued talking. His conscience tormented him for sending her to the beast's den instead of his daughter. He worried about her. Otherwise, food and a supply of the capital's tea were probably packed with her crew. Handing the young lady the box, she began to speak. Thanking the man, she said that it was the only show of caring she had experienced in this life. The Count couldn't believe it. Doesn't anyone help her pack? She said no one cares about her. A man shouldn't worry, for they had always been like this. Leaning down so that no one would hear, he asked if she was not cared for at all, how the princes treated her, and whether the servants looked after her. She remained silent. The Count thought the princes cared for her because they talked about it. He thought she lived a carefree life as befitted a princess. He wondered if they were all lying. They are from a lower class, but the royal family adopted them. That's why she told him she would be better off living with the Archduke's family. If no one cared for her in that palace, he would be honored to be her patron. He would see to her safety until she returned home. He asked her to take care of herself, and to send him a letter at once if she needed anything. She thanked him. Komen had always been a kind man, both in story and in practice. She would never forget his kindness and the way he protected his family. Daphne was called by her brother, who wanted to see her before she left. She thought he was busy, but he came anyway. He was very worried about her. She said she was going to be fine. He didn't expect her to have to make a commitment so early. He wished it was just a dream. He said it must be hard on her. Then he told her to take care of herself. She would finally live up to her family's expectations. The guy said this with a wry smile. The girl's heart was pounding and her hands were shaking. She needed to calm down. The worst was far ahead, not now. She thanked him for coming to see her off. She thought no one loved her, but he had come. The young man asked if he could dislike her. He was preoccupied with the inheritance. Apparently, she was upset about it. Daphne remembered well that he never came to see her himself. Him or the king. They all just watched her die alone. What a fool she was for not realizing that. Ruslan says that he will burn the portrait immediately, since he threatened her, and that Beatrice should wait for him in the study. But she is shocked by his decision. The young man didn't stop. He said that if he had power in this house, he would never let her go to that monster's house. Daphne is sent to certain death, and Alan, meanwhile, is so busy playing to the public. The girl did not understand how the others could believe this spectacle. Vassals and nobles follow him around. She thanked Alan, saying she didn't know he cared about her. She said she thought he had forgotten about her altogether. Neither he nor Claire, they did not come to her once. The girl began to cry, saying that no one loved her. Everyone had forgotten about her. Even when she came down with a fever, no one visited her. She was so lonely. Lifting the girl from the ground, he said he had business to attend to, so he would go. And Daphne should look at the carriage where the trunk stood. Alan said he had prepared gifts for her, a whole trunk, and it was already packed in her carriage. She thanked him. The girl looked at her brother, telling him to take the time to talk to her next time. She realized that next time she would kill him. She promised herself that she would take everything he had from him. The girl got into the carriage. The servants crowded behind Daphne's personal maid. One of them said that Marielle was also going to the monster's land. Another said that was what she should do. She always looked at them as dust beneath her feet. To die with her mistress is terrible. The maid said there were no other carriages available, so she would go with her. Daphne could have asked for another, but she would not ask for one for her sake. The maid sat across from Her Majesty the Princess. The girl noticed red marks on the woman's hands as if someone had hit her. Unable to bear it, she asked who had hit the woman. She replied that she had just scratched herself while working. Daphne said it didn't look like a scratch. A little nervous, she said it was really just a scratch. Marielle had been beating the girl. Maybe she had hurt the other maids with her temper. The princess decided to deal with her gradually. What she did would turn the plot around a bit, but not now. She'd even gotten the chest from the Count. But if things went wrong, Marielle couldn't understand why Daphne was suddenly interested in the lives of ordinary people. A couple of days ago, she couldn't even speak properly. The woman didn't understand how the girl could have changed so much overnight. The woman got out of the carriage, heading towards the man. After seeing Marielle's outfit, the others didn't understand how a simple maid could have such rich clothes. It's so outrageous. She's going to the Archduke without their permission. The knights will protect them, but no one will protect two commoners. After speaking to the man, the woman returned to the carriage. Turning to Daphne, she said that the Parman Pass would be coming soon. She had bought something for Her Highness in the nearest village. The girl thanked the maid. She knew the plot, so she needed to make sure of something. Daphne asked to open the carriage door for her, saying she wanted to talk to the knight, calling out to the man. But the man said that when you call out to your elders, you have to come up yourself. The lady said that the maid had told her that the Parman Pass was coming soon. She asked if that was true. The man confirmed Marielle's words, asking what else the girl wanted. She said that she was very seasick on this road, then asked if there was no other way. The knight told her not to say anything stupid. He knew the way better than she did. Then he told her not to think that she could just change the route as she wished, all the more so because he has no intention of obeying the orders of some commoner. Outraged, the woman wanted to object, for he was being disrespectful to Her Highness. Daphne asked if he knew that high office usually came with high responsibility. He told her not to teach him. Marielle says that's just outrageous. The girl said to leave it alone because he kind of agreed that he would take responsibility if there was an accident, so they decided to watch. At that time, the knight finished talking to the maid. Daphne asked if she had heard their conversation, but she said she had not heard anything, for she had only just come up. The princess said that she was lying. She was standing nearby and had heard everything. The dark-haired maid told the girl to leave her out of it, for she had heard nothing. The princess realized that they were as arrogant as ever. She would remind them both of that. As the story goes, when the rockfall happened here, Daphne arrived to save Count Coman's daughter. It's about to happen. Marielle noticed that the stones were falling. The girl ordered the horses to stop. The knight told everyone to keep riding. The other said that the princess had told him to stop. Getting angry, he said he would not allow a commoner to give out commands here. The man got off his horse and walked towards the princess. The knight said it was impossible to disobey the order of royalty. The captain told the man to mind his own business. Reaching for the carriage door, he opened it, telling her to mind her own business. Marielle asked what he was allowing himself to do. He is insulting the princess with his behavior. He told her to keep quiet. No one would protect her here. The knights didn't know what was going on. They're supposed to protect the princess's life. Another knight told him to stay out of it. It would only be a headache. The maid said that even if the emperor was not around, he should obey him. The captain continued, saying that a woman should not teach him. Their argument was interrupted by Daphne, who said that his knightly honor was becoming more and more doubtful to her. And if he doesn't want to ensure her safety, then the path will entrust it to the First Division. Getting out of the carriage, she ordered Marielle to get the luggage out of the carriage and told the others to get out of the carriages. The ladies who got out of the carriages said that she had made up something about the rockfall, for she simply did not want to go to Bertrand. When they raised their heads, they saw the stones flying from a great height straight at the carriages. They couldn't understand how this was possible. If the princess hadn't told everyone to get out, they would have all been swarmed. The knight said that the princess's carriage was broken, but the others were unhurt. She realized that now it was time to punish them. Pointing her finger at the dark-haired maid, Daphne told her to write to the emperor that she was a witness to the commander's actions. The woman was reluctant to do so, asking why she was blaming it on her. The girl realized that, as always, there was no one on her side. No matter what happened to her, no one would stand up for her but Marielle. Just like in the palace. She would have to make an argument. Daphne asked why they were acting this way. She is indeed a commoner by blood, but she was adopted by the imperial family. And if she reports what happened to the emperor, everyone will be guilty of death. Some of them will be lucky, and they'll get off with jail time for insulting the imperial family. So the dark-haired maid has no choice but to write. The woman said she didn't have any paper or ink, so she asked her to wait while she went to get some. Marielle told her not to labor. She had paper and ink. The woman was clearly angry. Taking the paper, she began to write that the commander of the knights had been negligent in his duties, insulting the princess and ignoring her warnings.
As a result, the princess was in danger, and His Imperial Highness's order to deliver the princess was jeopardized. Seeing the looks of the commander and the maid, the girl assumed that they wanted to kill her to save their own skins. After writing, the woman began to fold the paper, saying she would send it herself. Daphne snatched the sheet out of the woman's hands, saying she would check it first. When she unfolded the paper, she saw the text that they had made it to Parman Pass just fine, when suddenly there was a rockfall. The princess and her carriage are unhurt, and she, the maid, reports to him that, outraged at what she read, the lady began to shout for them to be captured, for to show such contempt for the royal family is appalling. Seeing the knights standing still, the girl asked if they too wanted to go to prison for insulting the royal family. Daphne had almost died because of them all, and they could be accused of attempting to kill her. The boys immediately grabbed their commander and the dark-haired maid. The woman started screaming, apologizing, and saying she was wrong. They had dealt with the most violent ones. No one would question her authority now. The young lady ordered the knights to escort the two to stand trial. Daphne needed a carriage. Seeing a whole carriage, she told Marielle to carry her luggage there. The red-haired girl, along with the other one, began to resent it. This carriage belonged to them. They asked what she would order them to do, to walk. The princess told them to take care of themselves. There is a village nearby. Perhaps they could ask for some kind of carriage. Walking towards the carriage, Marielle asked how the princess guessed. She answered only that she just knew, and that was all. As she got into the carriage, she smiled, saying that she would now have a breezy ride. The Archduke was addressed, saying that the princess had arrived. The man wondered how long she would last here before she howled from the cold. He also said he didn't know if she was suitable for the Archduke. The boy only replied to keep the man quiet. But the man went on, saying that if she found out that they were going to angry, he turned to the man, asking if he needed to repeat himself a second time. The man bowed, apologizing for his rudeness. The Archduke said the man hadn't made an opening. He too thought she wouldn't last long here. When the princess arrived, everyone saw the second carriage as well. They did not expect her to put the maids in the carriage. The Archduke, surrounded by the others, waited for her to come out to look at the princess. Stepping out of the carriage, the princess walked towards the crowd. Everyone was shocked. Pink hair. The Archduke thought the adopted princess was blonde. She's not at all as she was described. Charming. Hair like cherry blossom. A delicate pink. A guy in the crowd said her hair was the color of spring, turning to my lord. Another young man said he was looking in the wrong place. Should look at the way she was dressed. The boy suggested maybe that was how they dressed in the capital, in an oversized cloak. He didn't understand why no one had bothered to give the princess winter clothes. That's for an early fall cloak. Those careless palace snobs showed no respect. Marielle told them to go to the Archduke. The Archduke's knights could not understand that the princess had been given a cold cloak that did not fit her, and the knights were standing like statues instead of helping her. It was as if they wanted the princess to trip over the cloak. The man behind the Archduke said that this was not the proper way. Then the guy approached the girl, saying his name was Cale Bertrand. Henceforth, he would take care of her. Marielle asked what my lord allows himself. Not confused, the princess said her name was Daphne Blake. She took the man's hand, saying she was pleased to meet him. The young man pulled his hand out and started to leave, saying that the chambers had been prepared for her and she should rest. The butler would escort her out. She didn't realize maybe she had rushed things too much. Marielle told them to go inside quickly. Daphne noticed that the people here were friendly. Even though their peoples had fought in the past, they were eventually able to come to peace. As she walked down the huge corridor, she realized that she hadn't been to the citadel in a long time. She was scared here before, but this time she felt that she was much more comfortable here than in the royal palace. Bowing, the butler greeted Her Highness. He told her to leave her baggage here and follow him. He would show her to her chambers. The butler asked his lordship to forgive his lordship for being rude. He had been fighting monsters a lot lately. Daphne said that there was nothing wrong with that. His lordship lived in a land where there were many monsters, and he had to be careful. The girl guessed that right now he was on a monster hunt, and then asked when he would be back. The butler said the Archduke had already done a reconnaissance of the nearest town, so he'd be back by morning. If she asked to see Cale,
She won't be allowed to. There are guards everywhere. She needs to bypass the maids to get to the reading room. The man opened the doors and told them to go in. He heated the fireplace for their arrival. The luggage would be delivered here shortly. The room was 100 times better than her room in the palace. The butler told the princess to call him if she needed anything. She woke up and went to the dressing table. Asking Marielle to hand her a comb, she watched as the maid brushed her hair. Daphne wondered if the maids who had been sent with her had beaten Marielle. The woman said that it was indeed them, and then asked why the princess was interested in it. Then the young lady said that she could use them. If you bribe them with a good attitude with gifts, they would immediately become friendly. Edea and Rachel will be of use to her. We need them to mislead the emperor. That's what Marielle needs to do. The Archduke was examining his hand, at which point he was called out by the butler, saying that they had a good battle today. Kale said they were attacked by dark assassins on the way back. They had taken a few alive. They would be taken to the castle soon. The butler said he was worried that the curse might come alive because of the smell of blood. He prepared the lad a bath and a light supper. He also needed to remember to take his medicine. The Archduke was angry at the butler's words, saying that he remembered and that he should mind his own business. The young man grabbed his throat, realizing that he was thirsty. If he drinks the blood, the curse will gain great strength, but the medicine helps quench his thirst. He sank into his thoughts, which mocked him, calling him a blood-sucking ghoul who had eaten his mother and would soon eat his father, and then all of them. Beatrice's memories of the Lord's wife come to mind, of her father selling her to horse, of her father dying and her not having time to get a divorce because the Lord kills her. He also did not understand how she knew when he was coming. The girl said she really wanted to catch him alone because she had something to say. Getting up from the bed, she said she would support him. He asked what she meant. She said she would help him break the curse and become emperor, bringing glory back to the house of Bertrand, and even spring to his region. Daphne said it all here, pointing to her head. The young man asked how he knew she was telling the truth. She asked if she did that, would he believe her? As she touched his arm, he felt the power overwhelming the curse. The boy realized he wanted blood. Daphne went on to say she would make him emperor because he needed to be healthy and grow big. And when she grows up, to kill the entire royal family. Wrenching his hand out of the girl's grasp, he said it was treason. This time he'll pretend he didn't hear anything. Daphne said that he himself is preparing for a war for the throne. Turning around, he asked how she knew. The princess continued the story, saying that if the emperor knew, he would realize you were a rebel. But fortunately, neither he nor his cronies know anything, just her, so he has nothing to fear. She hates the prince and the emperor as much as he does. She wishes them the worst of deaths. Kale asked what would happen if he didn't agree. Daphne said that in that case, he would have one more enemy. Taking out his sword, the Archduke told her to be careful with her words. Putting the blade to the girl's neck, he said he could kill her. Then she said that without her help, he would have to live with the curse. Daphne asks how it is for him in general. She knows that blood doesn't quench his constant thirst, but makes it worse. He didn't understand how she could know all this. An adopted commoner, and yet she knows the deepest secrets of the court. He puts the sword to her throat, but she doesn't even move. She's not playing. She must have a lot of valuable information about the royal family at her disposal. Kale said he'd have to think about it. This is a completely unconventional situation, and he needs to calculate his options. Bowing, Daphne said it would be as he pleased. She left, saying they would see each other at breakfast. Edea and Rachel sat in their room, not realizing who the little shit thought she was. They couldn't understand how she could do that to Natalie and her fiancé. Edea asked if Rachel had any idea how she might have known about the rockfall. The woman didn't know. She wondered how herself. There was a sudden knock at their door. He informs the Lord that the inspection will be done when his dead wife has finally disappeared from this house. In response, the Lord desperately interrogated why she was still here. The Duke, and anyway, where's her maid uniform? Marielle told them to stop immediately. They've been friends since childhood, don't they remember? Edea mocked the woman. Rachel said they weren't friends, she was chasing them. Marielle realized that this was really true. Earlier, when Marielle was little, Edea and Rachel had accused her of stealing a brooch and leaving. They'd asked how she wasn't ashamed, telling her to pay up and then she wouldn't get hurt. They assumed she had stolen the brooch because she was a beggar. She tried to justify herself by saying she didn't steal anything. They were her friends. Afterwards, they said they were disappointed in her. She was a bad girl. Rachel said she hadn't changed since then. Then she told Marielle to tell them why she had come. She sat down on the floor and bowed her head, asking them to take her back to the capital with them, since they had already completed their task. She doesn't want to die here with Mistress because of her fault. Edia asked how long they could babysit her, a perpetual debtor, no thanks in her pocket. Marielle said she would do whatever they said. With a sly smile, Edia told Marielle to listen to them rigorously. She wasn't very bright, but she would be of use to them. The maid would have to report to them everything the queen did. Remembering, Edia decided to ask, how did the princess know about the rockfall? Marielle says it was nothing special, Daphne just guessed. She was afraid she couldn't get revenge, so she made a fuss. Edia says she knew it was a publicity stunt. She thought she could avoid their vengeance, but they would show her. Marielle realized that everything had gone well for Her Highness. Daphne slept in her chambers on her bed, realizing how cozy she was. She had never slept so sweetly in her life. Edia came to the princess's bed and pulled down the blanket, saying that she couldn't sleep so late. Dinner was coming soon, so she had to get up. Taking the girl by the hand, the maid led her behind her, saying that if she was lazy, what kind of example she would set for her subjects. She had also seen the way she had spoken disrespectfully to the Archduke yesterday. She needed to work on her. Edia told the young lady to wash her face, but the girl noticed ice in the water. Daphne asked how she could wash her face in icy water. The maid replied that all the water was ice cold in the morning, which could not be helped, and she begged a gracious pardon. Then she asked if Her Highness knew that washing with ice water made the skin more beautiful.
Ruslan said he ordered a dessert especially for Beatrice. She wonders if he wants to get closer to her, since he ordered a dessert just to her liking.
And more beautiful.
She reasons to herself that a good relationship between them won't spoil the contract, though she doesn't understand why he's so nice to her. Again, she addresses him by title.
Turning around, the two saw the Archduke. He asked why she was being rude to her mistress. Edia tried to justify herself by saying that she was not being rude. She explained that the princess had not yet learned how to behave, so she would teach her behind closed doors. Edenia said there was supposed to be another maid here. Kale ordered the guards to bring her here quickly. Taking Rachel under their arms, they brought the woman in. The maid decided to frame her friend, saying she didn't want to do it and forced her to do it. Rachel asked where she heard such a thing in the first place. She huffed and asked her. Enraged, Kale asked if the emperor was showing him such respect that he sent him pigs in the guise of maids. The young man ordered them to be executed. Daphne asked to spare them. They were just ignorant, not to be judged harshly. She asked not to kill them. If that's the case, they should be replaced as maids. They're not fit to be maids anyway. They'll be servants in the citadel for a month, and they'll catch up. Edia asked why such disgrace. They were noble women. The Archduke glared angrily at the maid and made her shut up. He told her to get out of his sight, and so did Rachel. The princess asked why Kale had come. He replied that he wanted to show her the dining room. She apologized, saying she had to get ready and would come down. Entering Her Highness's chambers, Marielle brought her clothes, saying she would go wipe the floor. Thanking the woman, she continued to get ready. After dressing up, she went downstairs with Marielle. When he saw her with the maid, he walked over to them and took the girl behind him. He said they would leave the maids outside the door. Kale asked why she needed them after what had happened. Daphne said Marielle was a good maid. The Archduke said that the princess hardly trusts her. The girl said she knew she couldn't betray her. She had the opportunity to do so, but she stopped it. The Archduke, of course, said he would help her, but he asked her to answer why she hated the royal family so much. The girl told him that they had paid her bail, and she had been adopted from an orphanage. All orphans wanted to eat enough and what they wanted, and wear pretty dresses. But sometime later, she learned that the orphanage had burned down. They say it was done by robbers to steal the charity offerings. Everyone knew it was the Emperor's work. He wanted to destroy the evidence. The girl doesn't know what they are up to. When she was brought to the palace, she was still no one. This princess, she's just a pawn to the Emperor. Kale was going to secretly test her words. Only then would he be able to break the fate. A fate forced upon them by the royal family. And support is not a bad thing. Bowing, the young man said he would accept her support. The princess said she would be glad to help him. He suggested they start the meal and tell each other something more. Daphne said we could talk about the economy of his region. She advised sending expeditions to explore the deposits. Many things could be of interest, but most of all, ore. Of course, you'd have to make a substantial investment before you could make a profit. But you don't have to worry about that. They'll deal with the mines later. He would have liked to look for investors now, but the ore was too valuable to share. And it's a very long process to mine the ore. Does the princess know what he's talking about? He doesn't realize what's going on as they make their way inside the house. One of the workers finds the Lord's safe. Princess know what he's talking about? The Archduke said there's been enough talk. He's going there right now. He'll be back tomorrow night. She had better stay here for her own safety. In her chambers, Daphne asked Marielle about the bracelet she had asked to buy. Holding out her hand with the box, she said she had packed it just in case. Thanking the woman, the girl went to the balcony, realizing that the wrapping was unnecessary. Marielle realized that the princess was up to something again. Throwing the bracelet off the balcony, the princess sat on the floor and cried. Running up to the girl, the maid asked what was wrong. The young lady pointed her finger at the woman to keep quiet. The guards ran into the chambers, asking who had offended Her Highness. One of the guards said they would help her. Just need to tell her what happened. The princess said she dropped her favorite bracelet when she went out on the balcony. It was a bracelet her mother had given her. The guards began to whisper. Still with the same smile, he offers to tour every corner of the estate, and they'll start with the $1 million trash can. He offers to tour, but she was taken in by the Emperor. So this bracelet was her only solace in the cruel surroundings of the imperial court. She loved this bracelet so much, she even named it Jane. The young man took hold of his heart, then promised that he would find the bracelet. Daphne asked if she could go with them. Realizing she couldn't, she said she would wait. Exactly as she had then, she would wait for her mother. The guard reminded the man that the commander had ordered the girl not to leave. That was a problem, but how much he could do for the princess if he was allowed to go out. The commander had warned him that my lord was away, so they needed to keep an eye on the princess. He'd told them to be sentries outside her chambers. The girl wasn't going to stop. She kept pretending that this bracelet was really important, saying that it was the only thing she had left of her mom. Sitting down on one knee, the guy said he was willing to find that bracelet for her. He would go and ask the commander for permission. Daphne smiled at the fact that it had worked out just as she had planned. The young man re-entered the chambers, saying that the commander had approved so they could go. The girl smiled, thanking him. The guard said no thanks. The main thing was that she should not leave his side. Turning around, the young man said that the maid could not go with them. The commander allowed only the princess to go out. Walking through the palace, the guard told the princess not to be sad. He promised that he would be sure to find a bracelet for her she called Jane. Daphne thanked the man, then asked where all the knights were. The guard said they were patrolling the neighborhood. She made up the story about the bracelet just to get out. Suddenly, one of the maids started asking for help, for a healer to be summoned. Daphne asked what was going on there, but the guy said that it was internal affairs of the citadel. He would have to look for her priceless bracelet next time. The princess asked if she could help. The guard told her not to worry. He would deliver the bracelet to her safely, and then he asked her to go to her chambers. After apologizing, he left. Daphne realized that the boy had run into Egmont's room. Egmont Bertrand, a relative of Kale's who had been sick for a long time. No one knew what he was sick with or how to treat it, so according to the plot, he was supposed to die. This left Kale with no support in the future. In desperation, Kale will be forced to swear an oath to Alan and Flora. She needs to save Egmont in order to help Kale. Guy asks how long my lord has been unconscious. The commander said that Lady Selma will be here soon, so it's okay not to worry. Turning to the sirs, she said she had come to help. The guard reminded her that he'd told her to go back to her room. Daphne said the matter was serious, and she couldn't leave. She asked what was wrong with that uncle and what he was sick with. The commander said it was not her concern at all, for they had already summoned a healer. She should return to her quarters immediately. Daphne went on to say that if he was breathing heavily, nauseous and feverish, she knew how to treat it. She will help the healer find a cure. No one understood how she knew about Eggman's symptoms. A girl with a bundle on her head and glasses approached them, asking what was wrong with my Lord Eggman. The princess asked if she was a healer, after which she said that maybe she could help her prescribe my lord's medicine. She asked to be allowed to help her. The woman said that Daphne was not in the imperial palace. The power of the emperor meant nothing here. Angry, the woman told her not to be bossy in such a situation, because they didn't care about her. Running away, the princess realized that she had to convince Selma to cure Eggman. The box that Earl Coman had given to the girl earlier. It was filled with all sorts of medicines, magic scrolls, powders. He already takes care of her. Even though she's basically nobody to him, Coman is really her friend. The girl ran to the healer and gave the medicine that would cure Eggman. The healer realized that it was a poisonous, oily berry. The princess said that it was indeed poisonous, but if you dried it, it only caused a slight upset stomach. The commander got angry, asking how they could believe that. Daphne told her that it was used to cure a disease that had symptoms like my lord's. She asked if she would be believed if she ate it. The princess took a bite of the berry and then said that the oily berry was poisonous, but in dried form, it was used in medicine. She could eat this amount and not get poisoned, but if she ate more. The healer didn't understand what kind of public play, what kind of blackmail. She didn't know if the princess was trying to prove her point or if she wanted to poison my Lord Eggman, even at the cost of her own life. The girl said that if they didn't believe her, she would offer to do a poison test after she tended to him. Selma agreed to such terms, asking that she not be distracted for the time being. The woman warned that if the test was positive, the Bertrand family would take it as a declaration of war from the royal family. After taking the test, the healer realized that the berry was not poisonous. Otherwise, the paper would have changed color. Besides, the princess had eaten some of the berry and she was fine. Selma confirmed that the berry is not dangerous. In addition to the chemical test, the princess is healthy after eating the berry. She trusts her, Her Highness. After a while, the healer noticed that my lord's shortness of breath had stopped and he was no longer feverish. And his heartbeat's normal. She's sure he'll come to his senses soon. Selma approached Daphne, apologizing for doubting her. She offered her a proper introduction. Her name is Selma. She is the Bertrand family healer. The princess said she understood anyone who doubted the purity of the imperial family's intentions. The girl said she was pleased to meet Selma. She was glad my lord was feeling better. He would wake up in a couple hours. The Duke went to summon their carriage, and Beatrice remained waiting for him on the stairs, satisfied that all had gone according to plan. The guard turned to the commander, asking if he would apologize to Her Highness. The man said she was on her way out. The boy realized that he never found Jane for her. The man said that if he were the young man, he wouldn't trust that girl so much. It's as if he doesn't realize that she could be sent to them by an enemy family to make war on them later. Afterward, the commander asked who Jane was. The boy said he didn't think they would go to such elaborate lengths. Whatever they asked, she didn't lie to them. Let the commander think what such a small child could know. The next day, Selma approached the girl, asking how she was feeling. She said that even though they were strangers to her, she still helped them. She thanked her for the cure. Daphne said she promised to give the healer the recipe for the potion. If the woman refined it, it would be possible to organize mass production for export. It would be a good profit and raise the prestige of the House of Bertrand. Selma said that would be a very good thing. It would help the Bertrands solve their food problem. It wouldn't hurt them. The cold is getting worse and worse. Then we must hurry to make this medicine. His lordship must hear of it as soon as possible. The woman did not understand if the princess really wanted to help them. The butler approached the Archduke, saying he had good news. My lord's father woke up. Cale immediately rushed to his father's chambers. Eggman asked if his son was worried about him. He was reported awake. He had come to his senses so soon. My lord asked what the tomboy wanted, to lie down for a couple more days. The Archduke asked about my lord's well-being. He said he felt much better. He could hardly sit up before, but now he sat up so easily. The servant said my lord should take it easy for now. He must not get up. He had just recovered. Eggman asked how Cale was. The young man said it was fine now that his father was awake. My lord realized that his son was really worried about him. It was as if he were going to die. The man asked if he was afraid his father would go to hell with his deceased wife. After listening to Her Highness, Selma realized that all the ingredients could easily be found in the lands of Bertrand. She still couldn't understand how she had missed such an important point, that the oily berry had strong healing properties. Daphne said that winters here were harsh, and that almost everyone in the capital knew about the healing properties of this berry. The servant entered the chambers, addressing the healer. The girl realized that Eggman had woken up. Selma asked to take her leave. The princess said she knew why, all because the lord was awake. The healer recognized how she figured it out. The woman confirmed the young lady's speculation, after which she said that she was quite an intelligent girl. Daphne asked if she could go with them. The healer gave her permission. The princess thanked the woman, then said she was very eager to see Lord Eggman conscious. The lord couldn't believe that the princess wanted to help them. Cale explained that she hated the imperial family with all her being. My lord said that since her intentions were no longer in doubt, he would ask that there be no misunderstandings. Knocking, Lady Selma asked to enter. A woman entered the lord's chambers with the young mistress. He asked if this was their princess. Cale confirmed his father's guess. The girl said she was Daphne Blake. Selma said that Her Highness had brought a medicine that helped him. She told the recipe for making it. If it wasn't for Her Highness, she would have never known about such an effective potion. Cale was shocked. He couldn't believe that the princess had saved his father. Eggman said he didn't know how to thank her. My lord asked the princess not to be discouraged. He just woke up and can't do anything yet. He is Lord Egemon Bertrand. Afterward, the man said he was glad to meet them. He asks her to forgive him for not coming to greet her first. He hopes that she's comfortable living in their home. If she missed anything, she should not be shy, but tell him. She thanked him. Cale said that he took good care of Mrs. Daphne, so there was no need to worry. Upon hearing his son call the princess by that name, the lord became angry, asking if the Archduke could think of an affectionate name for the princess. Cale said my lord himself calls her Her Highness. The man said that was different. She's the guy's wife. We need to support her and show her that they're family. They're living together, so they need an affectionate nickname for the princess. The man came up with one, Child. He liked it. Selma asked if he thought it was a little rude. Eggman didn't understand what was wrong. The princess is still a child after all. What else could she be called? Daphne didn't want to be called a child. Running up to Cale, she asked him. He apologized for what his father had said. The Archduke said my lord was very stubborn. The girl should forget it's just a nickname. The joyful lord addressed the girl by her nickname, then said, "Welcome to the family." After a while, the girl was being fitted for an outfit. Marielle sat on the floor and hemmed to make sure everything was perfect. The princess realized that the dress fit well. When she had finished, the maid asked the young lady if she liked it. The girl said she liked it very much, and the size was perfect. Knocking, someone asked if they could enter the chambers. Approving, 2 maids and Cale entered the chambers. The Archduke said he had a gift for her. They had brought different outfits. The girl said that she liked them all very much, but she couldn't understand why he had suddenly decided to give her so many outfits. The young man said that they had just gotten married the other day. The girl realized that these outfits were a gift to celebrate the marriage, so she thanked him again. They had to go soon, so the girl had to get dressed first. Walking over to the mirror, the girl considered her image. Marielle said the dress was already sized up. Daphne said the dress fit very well. The maid said that the tailor here was very skillful. That interested the lady. The clothes he makes are simply superb. She wants to know the man's name. But she has to go. The Archduke is waiting. Marielle said she was ready. The woman remembered that the princess forgot something. One must be sure to wear a wedding ring on the way out. Daphne didn't want to wear it. It would only take an hour to wear it, and then she could go. At the ceremony, she and Kale were so shy they didn't dare look each other in the eye. Would they ever be able to? As they approached the carriage, she wondered if she had kept the Archduke waiting long. Toth said she didn't. He also noticed that her new dress suited her very well. After giving her a hand, the girl got into the carriage. The couple rode opposite each other. There was still an awkwardness between them. Daphne didn't know if she should start a conversation. Determined to speak, the princess thanked him again for his gift. All the dresses were of excellent quality. Kale was glad that she liked it. The girl asked who the tailor was that made such marvelous outfits. My lord said it was Sir Leon. The lad told her that they say he was a tailor before he went to be a knight. The princess couldn't believe that such a big and strong guy was doing such fine work. She thought that if they set up a production facility,
She goes to her bedroom, telling herself that she will read a little and go straight to sleep. After a while, she is awakened by a voice. She realizes it's Ruslan sleeping on the couch. After a while,
the princess would like to show this nature to all people. If so, she has an idea. We need to get permission from the landowner and… The girl was interrupted by a man who turned to the Archduke. He said his name was Rand Akmel, and he was waiting for Kale. The girl turned to the man, introducing herself. My lord had heard that she had recently married his lordship. The princess confirmed the man's words. The man only replied that he was beginning to suspect that his lordship was not in his right mind. A man asked how he was to be married to a girl from the royal family. Kale wanted to justify himself, but he was interrupted by Daphne, who asked how Rand was talking to Archduke Bertrand. The man said he didn't advise her to interfere. This is their internal Bertrand family business. The princess said she's taking the Bertrand family name now too. She doesn't want to quarrel. She just wants to know about these parts. Rand said they should follow him. He'll show them around. Leaning over, Kale said that Akmel the vassal was of their kind. Then the girl said that all the more he had no right to speak to him like that. The young man said that Viscount Akmel had once been a very good man. He took care of him and raised him when his parents didn't have time to deal with him. The man turned around, saying that he had heard that his father was still putting off appointing an heir. The boy explained that things weren't going well for them, and Rand knew it.
She wondered why he was so beautiful, like from a painting. She notices that his shirt is all wet, because Ruslan was in a cold sweat during the night because of a nightmare. Beautiful, like from a…
Daphne once again cut into the conversation between the two men, asking if the man had a solution to this problem since he was so sure. His lordship had just begun to deal with matters of state, and what Rand himself was doing all this time is not clear to anyone. The young man realized that the girl was rather impertinent. They had not come here to look at the sights, but to see how their subjects lived and to help them. Clenching his hand into a fist, the man said that the Archduchess had a solution to all problems. The princess confirmed these words by saying that she had saved Lord Eggman, and he, His Excellency, only gives lip service to her husband. He doesn't deserve his title. Rand is glad to hear that the Lord is feeling better. As for saving his subjects, he wanted to see how she'd fix things up and help everyone. Daphne says she'll solve all the problems, and she'll do it today. She's the princess of the capital city of Periyun. Most of the people of Akame work in woodworking and crafts. Winters are getting longer, so the trees don't have time to grow. We should stop by and pick up some sundries, and ask about the resources of the local mountains. Apologizing, the girl said she would go to that store. The guard was frightened, not understanding where my lady was going. The knight was afraid the girl would get lost in a place like this. Closing the door to the store, she exhaled, realizing that she had managed to escape. She didn't know if what she needed was sold there. If not, she would look elsewhere. While looking at all the bling, she overheard a conversation. Women standing nearby were discussing the amazing view. Apparently, as it melted, the ground began to gradually peak out. But one of them had heard that there was nowhere to get water. Because of this, very few people live in that area. They believed that no one would buy this land, even for nothing. Daphne approached the women, asking what land they were talking about, explaining that the girl's father was an entrepreneur and had bought land in the region, and she was worried that he might have chosen this bad place. The woman asked in surprise if my father had bought land in the mountainous area west of here. She said that there was absolutely nothing to catch there. The desert is deserted, that's all. The second woman asked why she would say such a thing to a child. The princess realized that the mountainous area west of the city was the western border of the Viscounty of Akmele. She said that fortunately, it was not the land her father had bought. After thanking the women, she left, musing about this land on the western border of the domain. It was just what she was looking for. Entering the next store, the girl saw a small selection of explosive stones. If you combined them in a certain order, it would do just fine. Picking up a whole basket of rocks, she hoped it would be enough. She had bought the ingredients. All that was left was to find a place to combine them, now that she had a place to have some privacy. From behind her, someone called out to Daphne. It was a knight, running up to her. He said he was scared when she ran and out of sight. The young man asked what kind of box she was holding, offering to carry it. He said that if she went with my lord, he would buy her whatever she wanted and take care of the delivery. Daphne said she lost her head when she saw the beautiful things. She asked if she had made a mistake. The guy said it was his fault that he missed her running away. He offered to come back. Everyone was already waiting for her. Kale approached the girl, asking where she was going. She apologized. She glared at the shop windows that she couldn't help herself and ran away from Sir Leon. It was the first time she had been out walking in a long time and had brought so much trouble. The Archduke said the main thing was that he found her before dark. Rand, standing slightly behind Kale, said that he thought the Archduchess needed to be taught how to behave. Daphne said she acknowledged her mistake. She guessed he'd gibber something. Afterward, the man suggested they go back to the manor because it was late. As the pair rode in the carriage, Kale turned to the girl, saying that he hoped she wouldn't do this, going out alone again. The princess realized that he was angry with her. Apologizing, she said that she had misbehaved. He interrupted her, saying that it wasn't about that and he was just worried about her safety. The next time, he asked her to be careful. Daphne couldn't understand if he cared about her. He said that he was technically her husband and had to be responsible for her. The maids told the princess to rest. They would come and call her. As she took everything out of the box she had bought at the store, she realized that she had to make it before dinner. She didn't have time for anything else. She should grind them up and dry them. That way they would be easier to carry around. Suddenly, the girl was called. A servant girl appeared on the threshold of the chambers and reported that the food was ready and waiting. The girl said she would be down shortly. Already in the refectory, Rand said that the cooks had tried very hard, so he hoped that the dinner would be pleasant. The princess thanked him for his hospitality. She wanted to ask what her plans were for tomorrow, because she had somewhere to go. The man said there were no plans, so she asked him to show her the western mountainous region. The Viscount said there was nothing to see there. He would rather take her to... Before he could finish, Daphne interrupted him, saying they would go there. Kale said he respected his wife's will and asked her to honor his request. Rand hoped they wouldn't let him down by trying to escape. Once they arrived at the site, Daphne talked about how nice it was there. She liked the view, as it was picturesque. The princess turned to Kale, asking if he remembered their first dinner together at the Citadel. He said he remembered. He asked what about starting construction in this community. The only thing this neighborhood exports is timber. He asked what she plans to do with that. Daphne replied that this is the perfect place to open hot springs.
Beatrice is stunned, and Ruslan tells her that he has thus cast a protection spell on her. She is now safe in the castle, even though the Duke is absent.
Perfect place to open hot springs.
Beatrice is stunned, and Ruslan tells her that he has thus cast a protection.
Then he, the Vicomte, would be obliged to bow to her. Rand told her to act, but if she could do nothing, she would interfere no more in the affairs of the Bertrands. She agreed to these terms. Afterwards, the princess said that since she had his permission to use the land, then the girl took out a roll of a round crystal. The man asked what she was going to do. She said she wasn't going to do anything special. Throwing a round crystal on the ground, the place immediately exploded. Rand asked what she was doing. Was she really going to kill everyone? Suddenly, water rushed out of the ground. Leon told the commander that it was indeed a hot spring. He couldn't understand how the Archduchess knew they were here. Kale wondered how she knew where the groundwater ran. Turning to the man, the girl asked if he had forgotten his promise. She told him to kneel before her. Rand had to do it. Kneeling down, he said he had made a mistake and would accept any punishment, for he deserved it. Then the girl told him to swear loyal service to his lordship. That would be his punishment. The man said he didn't deserve it. He hadn't been with his lordship for years. Daphne said she wanted him by his side to be his counselor. Such a punishment is exactly what he deserves. She said the Viscount was unbearable. The Archduke is in mortal danger from the imperial family. He should be grateful that she did not treat him more harshly for leaving his lordship alone. He apologized to his lordship for his foolishness. He dared not ask for his forgiveness, but he asked to be allowed to serve Kale faithfully. The Archduke approved of this, even though the man had left the palace at the most difficult moment, and to apologize properly. He should assist Daphne in building a health center at the hot springs. Rand thanked his lordship and then suggested that they go back. The girl was pleased that she had been able to convince him. The Archduke said that she had done an excellent job. Kale noted that this was the second time she had helped him. The princess said it was her duty as an archduchess. He asked if she had planned it in advance. She said she had overheard information about the place in the marketplace and found out exactly where the hot spring was. The guy said she shares everything with him, so he will too. She must have heard about him being immortal. The girl had heard about it. The young man said it was true. His mother died for him. He, as he does now, remembers the day he killed her. He drank a potion to fight the curse, but it didn't help. He didn't know it then, but when Daphne appeared, it all became clear to him that the royal family hides many secrets. Touching the girl's shoulder, he asked that she would not act again without warning him. She remembers that he said there was a reason. The girl had agreed to the Archduke's request. He regretted having said that to her. Thinking she was tired, he told her to go to her chambers. As she walked towards the chambers, she realized that she trusted him completely, like everyone who treated her so well, except her brother, who lied to her face, saying he knew she could do it, and Flora, who said Daphne was her lucky charm. The girl remembered with horror what had happened the last time, when Alan had told her that she had helped him so much, and that Flora had thought he should kill her too. The girl clutched at her heart, her pulse quickening. She was afraid to trust Kale. Suddenly, my lady was called out, asking what was wrong. The commander asked if he should get a healer. Daphne asked what was wrong. The man said it was late, but he couldn't help but stop by. He should apologize. The girl didn't understand why. He explained that he had been doubting her lately, being disrespectful. The princess told him not to worry, because he was just doing his duty. And at first, no one trusted her at all, because she is the princess of the imperial family. The commander said that nevertheless, she had done a lot for them, and they continued to suspect her. The girl realized that she should have just accepted his apology. She says she accepts Sir Wessler's apology, but she asks him to never stop checking out his lordship's entourage. The man asked what she meant by that. Daphne said that he is a captain of knights and the closest bodyguard of the Bertrand family. The Archduke's life depends on his strength and vigilance. Both Felix and Beatrice had already burst out, which meant only until the fall. Daphne felt awkward, as if she had been trusted after just one word. The next day, when the girl was eating, one of the maids asked if she liked the dish, after which she warned my lady that the Archduke was coming for dessert, so she asked to be ready. Even the servants called her baby. It was all Lord Egeman. Getting up from the table, the princess said she would be ready. Sitting down with a cup of tea, she thought about how outrageous this was. She should do something about it. Kale said the reception would start soon. He would go to the guests, and she should look at it. He handed her the plan of the Bertrand Citadel, telling her to memorize it. He'd known it since childhood. The princess asked how he had memorized it. His father told him that it was a maze problem and it had to be solved. Daphne was surprised at the parents' methods. The boy asked that she take a good look at it before the guests arrived.
She realizes that he only seems cool and formidable, but inside he's a mere fawn and will be fooled like that unless she intervenes.
And sent out invitations. If she needed anything, she could come. Already in her chambers, the girl asked if Marielle was friends with those maids. She said that even if they quarreled, they were still her close friends. The woman asked if my lady had chosen the day. She realized that if they were going to make it, they would need to act. The princess said she had business to attend to the maid. The woman said that if she couldn't handle a difficult task, Marielle could help her. Wrapping the envelope, Daphne asked the woman to procure the fabrics and bring them to Sir Leon's home. First of all, she asked to take care of what she was asking to bring to Leon. Taking the paper in hand, Marielle realized that all the seats were arranged according to the status of the guests. She didn't understand. The princess had literally recently understood nothing about etiquette. The maid said that everything would be done. When the guests arrived, they couldn't believe that this building was the Dark Palace. An elderly man approached one of the guests.
Beatrice sees that the Duke has given her father, the Viscount, a decent sum of money to pay off for her. But she already has a headache. She decides to deal with it later.
The second man had heard that many teachers had worked on her, but all in vain. Some of them even refused to work with her. The other man asked what they wanted from a commoner who had been locked up for 8 years. She was not one of them. He said to be condescending to the Archduchess and to try to hold back a smile if she asked how to use a knife. After laughing, a woman called out to them, telling them to choose their expressions, for they had not yet seen either the Archduchess or the Archduke. Bowing, the blonde-haired man said that Lady Vanton was as perceptive as ever. He motioned for everyone to follow him. Opening the doors, they were greeted by Daphne, saying that she welcomed them to the Bertrand house, after which she introduced herself. Next to the girl stood the Archduke. Introducing himself, he said he was pleased to welcome them to the Dark Palace. Bowing, the guests said they were honored to meet the Archduke and the Archduchess. Daphne asked the guests to follow her. As the guests were escorted into the great hall, they opened their mouths in shock. They were surprised by the beauty, unable to believe that the Archduchess had decorated it herself. The girl said that she had help, Lord Egmont, for example. Walking into the hall, the lord asked.
Ivan enters the room, and Beatrice asks him if he has found what she asked for, blue diamonds. He replies that yes, there are many diamonds at the mountains of Earn. And Beatrice asks him if he has found what she asked for, blue diamonds.
Everyone immediately started asking my lord about his daughter-in-law. They also said that he loved his daughter-in-law so much. That's what family ties are all about. They heard that the Archduchess had helped him recover. Daphne was confused at how quickly rumors flew.
She asks how long it will take to clear the demons to start mining. 3 days, Ivan replies.
The Archduchess had helped him recover. Daphne was confused at how quickly rumors flew.
She asks how long it will take to clear the demons to start mining. 3 days, Ivan replied.
The young man said it was winter wood, quite beautiful. She had seen many products made of local wood, carriages, furniture, but the processed wood was not as beautiful as in nature. The lad explained that winter wood loses its luster when it leaves the lands of the Bertrands. The second woman said she didn't expect it to be so beautiful. She thought their trees were no different from those that grow in warm places. She only now recognized how beautiful their forests were. It would be wonderful to walk there. Daphne said to take a walk and bathe in the hot springs, then asked how they could do such a thing. Lady Vanton said she had heard about it. His lordship wants to build a hot springs health center in Akmel. The princess confirmed the rumors. The princess said that she would make special privileges to my lady when the health center was built. A second woman also asked for special privileges. The Archduchess promised her as well. The man was also outraged. She's already luring dignitaries to her new project. The guests are seated according to their status, so it's a no-brainer. If that's the case, maybe she knows he's engaged to Rachel. Now he knew. Daphne realized he thought she didn't know. Count Comyn had already told her all about Count Hintz. Lady Vanton's earring had caught in her hair, and she had hurt herself, so my lady suggested that she take it off. The man remarked that the Countess's earrings were lovely. She said it was a family jewel. She got it from her grandmother. They're priceless. Kale said he'd call a healer, but the woman said not to worry. She wouldn't spoil the atmosphere. It's nothing. She'll put balm on it, that's all. Maybe the earrings weren't well cared for. Daphne saw the servants touching the Countess's jewelry. She would have to be reprimanded for that. The girl didn't understand why Edea and Rachel were inactive. They would surely want to hurt her and Marielle at this dinner. The guests were about to leave, escorting the nobles to their carriages. They said they had enjoyed everything very much. Daphne wished them a good journey. At that moment, Lady Vanton noticed that one earring was missing. The princess approached the woman, recognizing what had happened. Count Hintz asked permission to stay and help in the search. The Archduchess gave her permission. The woman said she had left the earrings with the maid, but there was only one in the jewelry box. Daphne asked if she remembered what the maid who had been given the jewelry looked like. The woman said she remembered. Kale immediately summoned the servants. The lady immediately pointed to one of them. The Archduke asked where she kept Mrs. Bunton's earrings. She said that she had indeed been entrusted with them for safekeeping, but then she had given them to Marielle. The princess's maid said she hadn't even seen that girl. The lady approached her, asking her what her name was. The woman said her name was Marielle Liebert. Count Hintz said that there are rumors about the Liebert family, that they have a lot of debts. Marielle tried to justify herself by saying that they had already covered all their debts. Edea turned to Lady Benton and told her that the personal maid had just had bad habits from her childhood, but she wasn't bad at all.
Beatrice replied to this with a sly glint in her eyes that she was only in favor. They went inside the castle.
Her childhood, but she was.
Beatrice replied to this with a sly glint in her eyes that she was only.
Just like he knows Marielle didn't steal anything. This case will surely do Kale and my Lord Bertrand nothing but good. Lady Bunton has asked Her Highness to search Lady Liberty? Daphne said she would. The earring was nowhere to be found. The woman lashed out at the maid, asking where she had hidden her. But Marielle said she really didn't know anything. The lady said that if she returned it to her, she would not make a scandal. The Archduchess asked if it was strange that one earring was missing. The woman asked if the girl was trying to justify the maid, but she replied that that was not the case. If Marielle wanted to sell them, she would have stolen them both. So why did she only take one? Lady Bunton said that the princess herself had seen the maid pointing to Lady Libert. The girl said she had seen it, and she wasn't going to deny it. If Marielle had really stolen the earring, where could she hide it? Toth said there was one place in mind. There's a good chance she would have hidden it in Her Highness's dressing room, among her outfits or jewelry. Daphne suggested we look for the jewelry in the dressing room. After searching the dressing room, the maid said there was nothing there.
Earlier, she had asked Elliot how many checks she should write, to which he had replied with a laugh that no matter how many checks she wrote, the amount would still be less than the profit from the diamonds. At Ikaros Temple, everything is already arranged.
The Archduchess said that he could search her room again if necessary, and then he should check all the maids' rooms as well. Edenia and Rachel did not understand why the earring was not there. No matter how much they searched, there was no earring. The knight said he would search the maids' rooms. A few minutes later, Mrs. Bunton's earring was found. Edea and Rachel didn't understand why it wasn't in the princess's room, but in theirs. So the earring was in the maid's room. Rachel started yelling that Marielle wanted to accuse them of something they didn't do. The personal maid said that she wasn't even close to that place. She was in the kitchen watching over the treats. Daphne understood that Marielle had not received Mrs. S. jewelry. Maybe the maid got it wrong. Marielle and Edenia have the same hair color. The maid said she made a mistake. She didn't give the earrings to that maid, but to Edea. She was mistaken about the color of her hair. It's definitely her. She was so busy she didn't pay attention to her clothes. Rachel said Edea couldn't have done that. She said not to put Marielle's blame on others. The maid said she definitely saw it. Crying, Daphne asked why they did this all the time. Last time, they'd poured ice water on her, and this time, they'd taken another man's jewelry. Lady Bunton asked if they had really poured ice water on Her Highness. The girl said it was her fault that the maids were poorly trained. The lady was furious, not understanding how a maid could do such a thing. This behavior is inappropriate. Kale said he no longer intends to tolerate such behavior. They have been given a warning, and they are not even remorseful for what they have done. He said that this time they had overstepped their bounds. They tried to justify themselves by saying they were obeying His Majesty. The young man ordered them both to be locked up in the dungeon. Earl Hintz said he agreed that Miss Rachel had been rude, but she hadn't actually done anything. Kale asked what was the point of keeping rude maids who wouldn't even heed warnings. Judging by the way he's protecting her, he's not afraid of the dungeon. Daphne said that Earl Hintz is engaged to Rachel, so naturally he's concerned about it. If he dares to oppose the Archduke's decision, then he's ready to say goodbye to the title of Earl. If not, it would be best to apologize to Marielle and retreat. The Count said he misunderstood, so he apologized to Lady Liebert. Miss Rachel is his fiancée, so he had a preconceived notion. The woman forgave him. Lady Bunton thanked Her Highness for finding her earring. She asked how she could thank her. Daphne was pleased that an item of value to her had been found. The maids were in the dungeon, freezing cold. Edea suggested that if no reports were made to the Emperor, he would surely realize that something had happened to them and send a man to help. Daphne, who heard that, said that wouldn't happen. To the Emperor, they are just pawns. Rachel shouted, saying that the Emperor had promised them princess seats. The Archduchess asked if they really believed him. Even if it came to an engagement to princes, their families would just be used and then discarded for lack of use. They countered that they had families. The princess said their families won't help them, because Earl Diodorus and Earl Brinton are broke. But she might give them a chance. Naturally, only one of them. Daphne asked Marielle walking down the hallway if she wanted to choose. A little earlier in the princess's chambers, she warns the woman that she wants to go down to the dungeon. It's chilly, so she asks her to prepare warm clothes. The maid asks why she wants to go there. She says she wants to meet her friends. She doesn't think of them as such, though. The girl knows Marielle doesn't want to meet them. It's all over her face. But is it really worth missing out on a good spectacle that will see one of them disappear forever? The woman asked what if the one left behind continues to riot. Daphne said that would never happen again. She would make it so that she wouldn't have a chance to even think about it. Marielle asked which one she would keep. She assures him that she has tested everything and is therefore confident in her product. She even offers to try it on and think about it. Would keep. She assures him that she has tested everything and is therefore confident in her product. She had said so many things. They should be grateful to her. They shouted, asking if the woman thought she could get away with it. Edea reminded them that the woman had recently cried and asked for help, so they shouldn't kid themselves. The princess said they were mistaken in thinking that Marielle had acted of her own free will. She was the one who made the maid act like that. Daphne laughed at how gullible they were. If they behaved like ladies, they wouldn't be sitting here. But now it's too late. The Archduchess didn't care if they died here or not. She would still release one of them. Turning to Marielle, the girl asked who would be better to release, Edea or Rachel. Rachel said she was wrong. Edea apologized for what had happened. She attributed it to the fact that she had circumstances. Marielle remembered what had happened when she was a child, when she was forced to do all their whims. Rachel had said that if you didn't have money, you should get a job. Edea asked how the situation was at the personal maid's family. If things aren't good, she can work for them for the time being, and her parents could live in her house. There would be hot food and even desserts every day. They laughed at her and humiliated her in every possible way. The woman said she could not make up her mind, so she asked her mistress to decide. Daphne left them a bell, saying that the one who was ready to obey her should ring it. Both women immediately jumped on it. Edea was released, and Rachel blamed Daphne, saying she was the reason her life had gone down the drain. She tried to hit my lady, but was stopped by the guards who managed to grab her. The woman was led away as she screamed that she would not be silent. Edea had survived, but if the information about the family's ruin and the Emperor's disfavor was true, she didn't know what would happen to her now. Daphne reminded Edea that she had promised to obey her so she would help her. He took the necessary documents and was about to leave. Beatrice began to persuade him to stay because it was getting late. If he didn't want to spend the night in the haunted castle, he could stay at the inn.
hats and was about to leave. The girl told Edia not to forget her promise to serve her. She will help her stay in the castle and work here, but she still has many other things to do. Edia must report to the Emperor everything she tells her. The Archduchess told the maid to go back to her room and write the letter. Joyful Edia ran to do the errand, saying thank you to her mistress. As she stretched herself, the girl said that the urgent matters were taken care of. She saved Eggman, distracted the Emperor, and found the hot springs. The Diodorus family won't just accept that only the Brintons got away with it. Enemies must be dealt with by enemies, by getting them completely ruined. Rachel was carried to the cell. She did not understand why she had to endure such humiliation, what she had done. Noticing the stone, she told the guards that her hands were very sore. She would obediently follow. So she asked them to let her go for a while. They allowed it, but only as far as the exit. They told her to follow them. Marielle thought these two would never apologize in her life, but it worked out well, and she even liked it. But for some reason, she felt like she was about to throw up. She realized it seemed to be all about Daphne. Her mistress helped her, but she doesn't have that right to get that help. She had always been kind, too, after all. But at some point, she had adopted the behavior of those two. Marielle realized she needed to apologize to Mistress. She'll do her best to get back the money she stole from her. She should ask her to leave her alone, since she was her mistress now. Turning to the princess, the woman wanted to apologize, but she couldn't gather her thoughts. He sadly says that they are only a couple to each other on paper. Mistress now. Marielle stood in front of the lady, shielding my lady from the blow with a stone. The next moment, the woman fell to the floor with an abrasion on her head. She wanted to apologize to the girl. If she could have apologized earlier. He looks longingly after her and whispers her name. With an abrasion on her head. Finding the runaway, the guards led her away. Cale asked if Daphne was there. Then he asked her to come into the chambers, apologizing. He had heard that the girl's personal servant had been injured. Daphne guessed that Sir Wessler had told him. The girl realized that Marielle could have just stood back and watched or held on to the Emperor. After waking up from the blow that time, she apologized to her mistress. After saying that, there was no way she would leave the maid first. Milady tells me that it happened quickly, but according to the doctor, the wound is not deep. She was a little scared, though. The young man said that the girl was in danger. After she arrived, some events began to happen. He wondered what was going on in her head. He didn't understand why she had come to the north, which didn't suit her at all. He didn't know what lurked behind that innocent expression, what plans were in her head, whether she hated the imperial family. If he, as he promised to kill completely the entire imperial family, and then, my lady brought the young man out of his thoughts, saying that if he was worried about her, there was no need. She was fine. She wasn't hurt. She took his hand. He couldn't understand what it was. He didn't understand if she really cared that much about him. Wrenching his hand away, he decided it wasn't her he cared about, but her abilities. Cale told her to just take care of herself, the kind of power that could quell her curse. He said she was first and foremost the daughter of the Emperor. Daphne said she knew that very well. She didn't understand. He wanted to tell her that if anything serious happened to her, the Emperor would come here. The princess said she has dealt with the two unfaithful maids. She will be able to stay out of the Emperor's sight for a while. Moreover, it seems that she was able to resolve the issue of provisions in Botrond. 2 days later. The Earl of Brinton was welcomed at the castle of Botrond. Edia had written to her father that Duchess Bertrand had promised to help their family, for which she asked him to arrive there as soon as possible. He rushed as soon as he received the letter from his daughter. He realized that the Duke had no reason to help him. However, he could not go down in history as the Earl on whom the Brinton family had been cut off, by any means necessary for him to get the Duke's help. A man told his lordship that the Earl had arrived. When he saw the young men sitting on the throne, he was shocked. The man told Brinton to take off his plaid to show respect.
Bowing, he said hello to the Duke. He was just lucky. The deity itself had helped him. It had sent him the same kind of milksops. Cale said that among all the other contracts were the deeds to the Earl's estate in quite a decent condition. The man said that he had deliberately chosen the best one, for they had offered quite a large sum of money. And it was true. If the house goes up for auction, all sorts of Fords will flock to it. Daphne said it looked sparse. The man asked why the Duchess would say that. It's everything that belongs to the Brinton family. She said it is a wasteland. Afterward, she said she wanted that land. Among the property owned by the Earl of Brinton, there was one piece of land which he had not mortgaged. It was a secluded tract with no roads. That's why no one ever traveled there. The Heath of Mayton. Thanks to the efforts invested, this heath has become fertile again, and anyone would be interested in it. The reason why so far few people knew of the rich wheat fields in these lands was because the Earl had carefully hidden it from the eyes of others. The man asked what the girl was saying. She sighs heavily at the fact that Roche's simple words are not understood and waves her hand. The reason he was hiding this plot was because of taxes. The man with the title of Count had cheated the Emperor himself out of some taxes, violated the ban on exporting wheat in a bad harvest year, and made deals with other nations. If His Majesty finds out about this, it won't be just bankruptcy. The Count asked the Duchess to save him, 5 or even 6 years ago. Daphne only wanted to probe and ended up revealing his secret. He realized he was being bullied by a little girl. Cale said that if the Earl would give them this wasteland, they would shut down the wheat business. The man agreed to those terms. The next day, Daphne showed Mariel the deeds to the heath. The maid asked if it was true. The princess said it was true, and the Count also gave the cornfield in addition. The woman said that the mistress had done a lot for her. She asked if Mariel was okay. The girl said she had a headache, but passed when she saw Her Majesty. The woman was curious about something. She meant Mrs. Bunton's earring. The maid asked how it happened that she had found it in Edia and Rachel's room. They must have hidden it among her things. The girl said she found it in the woman's possession and hid it in their room. To be more precise, she ordered it, and Sir Leon carried out her orders. So Mariel should thank him when she meets him. Daphne said she wouldn't be at the castle for a while. She's going on a picnic. The princess said that while she was away, Mariel should take care of her health. When she returns, there will be no time to rest. The maid said she would get well as soon as possible. The Archduchess left the woman's room. She was approached by a maid who said she had found a suitcase in Miss Mariel's room, and in it were Her Majesty's things. There were things in there that she had left for her to keep. The woman asked what to do with the things. The girl said to take them back. Daphne knew that you couldn't trust people, or they might betray you and leave you for dead. It had happened in Korea and in her past life, and it was happening again. The girl said she would take these things for herself because they belonged to her, and the maid could not be bothered. A few years ago, when she was still living in Korea, she was caught up in the plot of a fantasy novel. Life outside the book, her life in reality, was like a living hell. Her mom had left this world when she was a little girl. Beatrice shows him the checks and reminds him that they are checks from the sale of demons, which Roche in turn bought personally from the Northern Duke. Hate and hopelessness. But she set out to survive, no matter what the cost. After more than 10 years, she managed to pay off her debt, even though it seemed impossible. The day it was over, she bought herself a new blanket. It was her gift to herself, and now she was free. The couple rode in the carriage. Cale thought about how strange she was. She came to the castle on the Emperor's orders and told him to kill the entire imperial family and take the throne. At first, he thought it was a trap set by the Emperor, having figured out their plan. Who had figured out their plan. He wondered if she might have been beaten. An orphan from the commoners? Yet the Emperor had personally brought her into the palace. But those maids who came from noble families sent from the imperial palace did not hide their contempt for her, though he doesn't think she treated them any differently than she did in the palace. It doesn't give him any comfort. His father says it's getting hot. jokingly suggesting it's because of the fire his son's eyes burn with. He asks if his son can't get enough of it. Embarrassed, Kale said it wasn't at all what he thought it was. My lord wondered why the Archduke would want to go on a picnic in such windy weather, and he decided to disguise the wedding trip as a picnic. The boy said it was nothing like that. The young man asked his father what Daphne was like. The man replied that he didn't know. The boy asked if his father felt she was different. 13 years old, quite a young age. Egmont said that at that age, there is a lot of talk about commoners, aristocrats, the emperor, and also a lot of crankiness and annoyance. But she's beyond her years, smart and outstanding. She quickly understands what's what, and thanks to her insight, she is already thinking about the future. Kale 2 years ago at the same age wasn't like this. The man asked if his son felt anything by looking at her. The man said he didn't know. Guessing that he needed to treat her affectionately because she was sweet and smart, he decided to ask again. The man said he meant that she was special. She has something in her that the others don't, and their meeting was facilitated, perhaps not by a man, but by some divine power. The young man was not interested in such nonsense. He asked what all this mystical talk was about. He didn't think his father would start saying such tedious things. The man said that he had confidence in this girl. Who knows? She might bring new times to their family. Perhaps this girl was sent to them not by the gods who had cursed them, but by his mother, the former Duchess Bertrand. It sounds doubtful, but the fact that the emperor's illegitimate daughter turned out to be very clever is true. However, what her true intentions are, where she got the power to restrain his curse, whether the emperor sent her, these are all things he doesn't know. It would be too hasty to take her as someone close to him. The young man said that if his father was of that opinion, he would not argue. The boy wondered if it would be better not to go against her, but to play along as much as possible, to better understand what was going on in her head. And then he could decide whether to reject or accept her. The girl woke up, smelling noises and smells. She realized they were at the sea. She remembered that the two men were unfamiliar with the heat. Both men lay in the carriage, unable to get used to it. Southern lands, the coast of Maraguna. The guards were shocked to see the southern sea without ice for the first time in their lives. Egmont suggested resting there for a while, because it was hot today. The guards were glad. The man could be quiet for a while. Seeing a couple of young people, he threw them out and carriage, saying that since that was the case, they needed to go on a date. Closing the door in their faces, the couple were left alone. Daphne suggested a walk along the coast, as Mr. Egmont had advised. While the girl was sitting on the shore, Kale was swimming in the water in his swim trunks. She realized that it was not for nothing that he was the main character's rival in the novel. She was looking at him too intently, which the guy noticed. Looking at Daphne, he didn't understand what she was thinking. He approached the girl and asked if she could catch that crook. That's why they came here, a few days ago. Bertrand Castle. The princess asked the Earl of Brinton if he was in this situation because of the rogue. There is information about an investment that has recently shaken the entire high society. A new kind of crystals had been discovered that contained much more magical power than ordinary crystals. And the man immediately invested, with difficulty getting the funds. He confessed that he didn't like the North at all, and became a duke only because of the contract with the previous ruler. He asked Ruslan to just manage the land. At this rate, the Brinton family will have a collapse from which it cannot recover, but he and the Duke can find the rogue. But on the condition that he bails out Mainton Heath and pays for the crook's capture with a field of sugarcane. The man said he wouldn't spare the lands if they caught the scoundrel. The girl replied to Kale that she would certainly capture him. The longer the tale, the easier it is to catch the criminal. She asked if he didn't trust her because of his age. The young lady told him not to worry. The information about the criminal and the plan to catch him were in her head. The guy said he wondered why they needed to get involved personally. They could have just given the order and it would have been done. She said she couldn't let that happen. This rogue they must certainly catch together. If they miss this chance, Prince Alan will do it. And in that case, he will only strengthen his position as the heir to the throne. And she's not going to let that happen. Kale said he heard she has a special relationship with Prince, but he can't understand why she hates him. The girl said that if that's how it looks in the eyes of others, then Alan is not a bad actor. Alan is sitting having a cup of tea with his guests. The butler comes over and says that there has been a very entertaining rumor lately that the Duke's dying father has been on the mend. Everyone is just discussing the hot springs he has organized. The girl interrupted, saying that the hot springs in the north were all due to the princess. It is said that she personally dug the ground, forgetting her status. The boy said that it was interesting and that he and Daphne had different blood. She was his sister and princess, so he would ask them not to lose face over unfounded rumors. Alan didn't understand what his sister was doing in the north if there were such rumors about her. Eggman shouted from the carriage that it was time for them to go. Daphne turned to the Duke, saying that she had a great idea. She asked if he would like to try an interesting game with her. A group of people arrived at a wealthy port with an extensive fishing industry, Lasmeria, and this is the atelier where the middle and upper classes dress. Muddies. The reason why Muddy is so famous is very simple, namely the prices, which are insanely high. The price tag on a small bag is such that a peasant family can live on this money for 6 months. Noticing the princess's gaze, Eggman approached the bag, asking if it looked nice. The man offered her different bags. The cost of the second one equaled the cost of a house for a peasant family. She said these things were not worth it. She said to go to a cheaper store. Everything here is too expensive. They wouldn't be here long, so there was no need to buy anything. Eggman thought their little girl could live large, but she turned out to be quite frugal. The man said he wasn't suggesting she buy something like that every day, but she needed to get used to spending money. Daphne said she already spends a lot. It is not worth getting used to it even more. Plus, in a past life, she dealt with finances instead of Alan. Compared to the kind of money she was managing, it was just a drop in the bucket. Kale said that this little thing wasn't worth so much discussion. Walking over, he asked Daphne to hold the bundle. The girl didn't know what was in it that he held out to her so pathetically. It was Meldy's certificate of ownership. Eggman said it was like they were brother and sister and it was a pretty fun game. Afterward, he said she was very lucky. Now she's got a brother who can go out and buy an entire atelier. And people began to whisper that God didn't like the temple and sent his descendant back to Earth to destroy it. The men realized that it wouldn't take long to prepare. After all, they had a genius alchemist. The girl was walking through the streets. She guessed that there was just a festival going on. It starts from today. It is said that on this holiday, it is customary to ask for the blessing of Lasmel, the goddess of the sea. Every year, aristocrats and peasants make offerings to the statue of the goddess Lasmel and pray that she will bless them with a big catch and good weather at sea. These lands no longer worship other gods, but they seem to have kept the tradition of helping the poor. Kale wondered how much longer they had to pretend to be brother and sister. The guy noticed the girl was missing. She was standing at one of the counters. She was looking at all kinds of costume jewelry. Daphne looks at the jewelry and calls the salesman crooks. In a past life, Alan had caught one such crook. As she ponders the actions of the thief who conned Earl Brinton, she realizes that he used the same method of fraud. He sold the capital's aristocrats a legendary sword that shattered from interaction with air. And to the aristocrats from the east, a handkerchief made of divine cloth that dissolved in water without a trace. The various rogue groups had disappeared from her memory for a while, but she remembered them again after the death of Countess Elmiller. The Countess had been enchanted by a blue diamond necklace and always wore it around her neck. High society followed the trend she set, so blue diamonds were at one time a fashionable piece of jewelry among aristocrats. The diamond bore the name Lasmel's Tears. However, this gem, which was worth a year's budget of an average aristocratic family, had a crushing secret. It contained a neurotoxin. The toxin first made the body weak, as if it had sucked out all the energy. Then it made it difficult to breathe and paralyzed. Countess Elmiller and more than half of the young nobles died in this way. As a result, the emperor intervened in the matter. Alan received the order and immediately began an investigation, during which it was possible to find out the actions of fraudsters. Now the aristocracy in the capital are once again enjoying the popularity of Tears of Lasmel. Surely Countess Elmiller must be feeling health problems by now. If you try to save her, it will be possible to avoid Kale's atrocities. Also, Daphne will be able to get the support of the Elmiller family, and for this you need to catch the crooks. The salesman interrupts her and asks if she's going to buy anything. If not, she can't touch anything. The guy says she made a quick comeback yesterday as they walk back. At the table, he asks Daphne if she found anything interesting, since it is a resort area after all. It was very crowded, and she didn't really look at anything. Daphne still can't find out where the con shop is. Then he suggests that she go for a walk with Kale. She wishes them well on their way, and he bent down for a kiss on the cheek, but she recoiled. Find out where the con shop is. Go for a walk with Kale. She wishes them well on their way. In response, she gets that he said he had business to attend to and had gone somewhere else, but should be back soon. In the meantime, Kale follows the maps inside the city and looks for a jewelry store. He notices her when she's standing at the jewelry store. He learns that she has a lot of jewelry and assumes she wanted to buy a keepsake. He realizes that she was drawn to some cheap trinkets that might be ridiculed. Kale wonders if she realizes she's the Duke's wife. He decides that he will have to properly explain her status to Daphne. Suddenly, he stops and realizes that all this time he has been walking in circles and has gotten lost. Kale unfolds the map again and looks at it carefully. Suddenly, a carriage whizzes by very quickly behind him. He had seen such carriages often lately and had been told that the aristocrats of the capital often rode in them. He wonders where they are all rushing off to. Suddenly, he hears two cafe workers talking behind him. One says that now they are all eager to buy that particular diamond, namely the Lasmeria gemstone, which is popular among the capital's elite. Heard that even the middle class buy money to purchase it as a dowry for a wedding. His cousin works as a maid in the castle of the head of the duchy, and she says that he is going to invest a lot of money in this business. The Duke goes in their direction and asks them to inquire. He asks where they can buy this diamond they are talking about. The workers bow and tell him that the diamond is called Lasmel's Tears, and tell him that they are simple peasants and have no way of knowing where to buy it. The Duke wonders if they don't sell them at the jewelry store. The girl has heard that too many people want to buy them, so it is difficult to get them without special recommendations, even from an aristocrat. A black silhouette with a hat is watching from around the corner. He's happy that things went smoothly, and that he didn't even have to do anything, and the Duke already found out. Kale asks if there's any other way to get those diamonds. Peasants, unfortunately, and do not know it themselves, then say that there is nothing to do and is about to leave, thinking to himself that with such a decoration, Daphne would understand her status. Suddenly, someone from behind pushes him. The man in the hat apologizes. The Duke looks at the man and notices the gloves on his hands in the very hot weather. One of the works looks at the man and immediately says that he has the very same diamond on his cane. There is an obscure and slightly golden color emanating from this blue stone. It's undoubtedly the same stone. The Duke catches up to the man and apologizes, to which the man turns around and asks what happened. After a while, the Duke returns to the mansion. Leon asks him if he has found what he was looking for. The Duke asks him if he has ever heard of the gemstone Tears of Lasmel. Leon was surprised today and asked if he wanted to buy it. Suddenly, a man enters the room with his daughter and says that Miss Daphne is waiting for him to take a walk together. The skeleton's hand resting on Beatrice's arm was gray, almost black. She says that as late as the afternoon, Elizabeth was fine. He asks her if she is still trying to make the sage stone. He warns her again that he has an urgent order and tells her to stop talking and make another stone. Hoping for a restful sleep, Beatrice burns special herbs in her bedroom. This medicine used to help her avoid nightmares, but now it has stopped for some reason, and she doesn't know why. Beatrice burns special herbs in her bed. She thought that when she got here, she would immediately notice some suspicious place. But there was nothing to be done, and she would have to check it out. She suggests that Kale go the other way. She decides to tell the Duke that she's hot and suggests going somewhere else. Earlier, the Duke lent the girl a stone that regulates body temperature, and he says that she should not be hot. The girl is upset because if it weren't for the stone, she would have changed him into a sailor. The Duke asks her why she came here in the first place. He only agreed because he didn't know. Daphne says that the rogues don't have enough power to touch the Emperor, so if they find out that the princess has come here, they will hide in their lair. Besides, no one pays attention to them, and she thinks that's pretty cool. The Duke doesn't know what she's talking about. He says that if that's the reason, he's asking her to be honest about it. Daphne says she doesn't want to reveal all the cards right away and suggests we start having fun. At the same time, there's a bag full of blue stones in the basement, which has created a gas that's escaping into the street and making people cough. The entire basement is filled with this very gas. The man says that the girl was very quick this time, and she asks why he needed so much of that useless rock. The men say that, as always, he needs these stones to hunt monsters. The girl remarks that he has never once brought monsters here. The machine interrupts her thought and puts a stop to their conversation, saying that they order and she must fulfill, and is asked to stick to this rule and not ask any unnecessary questions. It is already evening when the Duke and Daphne return back. The girl says she had a lot of fun today. Kale notes that they still haven't found the crooks, but they've been spending money all day and they'll report back to them themselves soon. It's been a good day today. Suddenly, Sir Wessler appears in their path. The Duke asks what he's doing here. The man replies that he was sent a note and asked for a message. Kale assumes it was the same man, and the girl tries to find out from him. The Duke sees a carriage beside him and assumes that he sent it too. Kale tells Sru that he has somewhere to be and asks him to escort Daphne out. In the building, she is still trying to figure out what is going on and is surprised that Kyle has met someone, but it was not in the book. She feels like she's just confused. She can't sit still. The girl runs out of the room, swinging the doors open, and Wessler tries to stop her. Daphne wants to follow the Duke and see for herself what's going on. While the man is trying to understand what is happening, the girl returns and asks him to prepare the carriage right away. They have already arrived at the place where the Duke is staying and have stealthily approached a lonely house in the woods. They peer through the window, hoping to find out what is really going on. They see the Duke standing in front of two men in elegant clothes. He is examining some kind of box. As soon as the girl notices the contents of this box, she immediately realizes that it is the tears of Lasmal. She turns away happily, unable to believe that the Duke himself has caught the crooks, and she finally realizes where he's been all day. She notices, however, that Kale doesn't seem to know anything about it. The Duke pulls his hand toward the gem and says it's not him. The two men are visibly nervous. They ask what he means. One of them says he is a gemstone expert, but before he can continue his thought, the Duke interrupts. He asks the man if he's not the gentleman he ran into today, then says he doesn't have time for such jokes and leaves. The men are visibly angry, causing him to say that he's not just going to walk out of here. The girl notices the two men flying in from behind the Duke and warns him about it. He turns around sharply, and in a couple of moments, the crooks are lying unconscious on the floor. Daphne says that these are the same crooks they've been looking for. She realizes that this is more like catching rats than anything else. The girl tells the Duke that he's amazing. What the princess notices is that the Duke's ear is a little red. Seeing this, she thought he was cute. She turns to the rogues and says that before she gave them their punishment, she wanted to ask one question, and that is where the alchemist who created the stone is now. Meanwhile, the same girl in the basement is trying to do something in the test tube, but she can't do anything, and she doesn't understand what the problem is. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door. Annoyed, she opens the door and in front of her is a Duke pestering her.
Beatrice is gathering grass. It's not much, but it's enough for her.
Suddenly, there is a knock on the door. Annoyed, she opens the door and in front of her is a Duke pestering her.
Beatrice is gathering grass.
The couple looks at all the contents in the basement. Daphne realizes that Adney hasn't changed at all, and she even seems pleased to see her again. At this time, the Duke questions the woman about everything. Adney justifies herself by saying that there is no way she has ever engaged in fraud in her life. However, Daphne says that's exactly what it is. She also says that she has certainly been scammed and taken advantage of, but if she goes to court, she will not escape punishment. Adney says she didn't know anything about it. Then Daphne says to follow her. She promises that not only will she protect her and get her out of this situation, but she can solve her research problem. Beatrice walks along and thinks that this far into the woods she would never have gotten if it weren't for these kids. Get her out of this situation, but she can solve her research problem. Beatrice walks along and thinks that this far into the woods if it weren't for these kids. They ran out into the yard of a small brick house. The fog was thickening around them. Thinks that this far into the woods. They ran out into the yard of a She saves her again this time. Daphne says that if she follows her, then she will save herself and find out why her experiments didn't work out. The princess says that the woman will be able to do her favorite thing, studying magical substances. 2 weeks later, 2 carriages are traveling down the road. The Duke looks out the window and admires the view. Adna is huddled in the darkest corner from the sunlight and closes her eyes, saying she is dying. Wessler tells her to be patient. Leon jokingly says that they were kind of going on a picnic, and he didn't think they would catch crooks on the way. Daphne responds by laughing and says that it just happened that way. She also came up with the idea of reimbursing the victims. It will help dispel the bad rumors about Kale. Daphne says they can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and admits that was her goal. But in return, they had to give up all those jewels. So she feels a little sad. But they didn't leave empty-handed. The girl says that Adna, the alchemist, will be very useful to them. She sent the rest of the rogues and all the money to the Earl of Brinton's estate, saying he would take care of the rest. Suddenly, the carriage door swings open, and the commander turns to Kale, shouting that there is a monster ahead. She asks the children who the man is. They answer her that it is the master of the mountain. They both infused the master with mana, but it didn't help. Perhaps because compared to him, after a couple moments, Kale stands with the monster's body lying on the ground and breathless. He notes that this one is an order of magnitude larger than its kin and asks to get it out of the way. She's thinking hard about the problem. It's more serious than she thought. The man's face is pale and his skin and hair are very dry. She didn't think she would ever see the monster in person and tries to touch it. But Kale tells her she can't touch it because it's poisonous. Daphne watched from the carriage. Sitting down, Daphne analyzes the skills of everyone present. Adney is an alchemist and can process monsters. Leon is a knight with golden hands. She realizes that Meldy's atelier will be hers if she trains Leon well, and realizes that he can bring a lot to the table. Suddenly, goosebumps start running down Leon's body. He assumes it's because of Adney standing nearby. The Duke listens and concludes that a pack of monsters is approaching. He starts to give out orders to the knights and his father, but before he can finish, he is interrupted by Adna, who says that she really wants to see this pack. But he continues his thought and tells Leon to return to the dark castle with the others. On the way to the castle, Daphne talks to Leon. She says that it is possible to make clothes out of monster skin. Leon asks if this is even possible. She explains that Adney can process the monsters to neutralize the poison. Then the skin will be softer too. She asks if the boy would like to try to do it. He thinks about it for a while and says he can't do it alone, but his brothers might be interested. He has many brothers, and someday they will inherit his father's atelier as well. Then Daphne asks him to talk to them about it. At the same time, Adney looks out the window. She sees the town they've come to and asks if this is heaven by chance. She also asks if it is always so dark, cold, and quiet here. Leon's face changes a little, and he replies that it is not always. Afterwards, Adney asks if they know why there is a red moon in the sky, and why monsters only appear in the Duchy of Bertrand. Daphne pretends she has no idea, but she has read the novel and so is aware of everything, but she realizes that she can't be told. The Duchy of Bertrand is snowed in. So many people mistakenly assume it has always been like this. Leon says that in the old days it was also sunny and warm here. No monsters, a very peaceful place. One day, for some unknown reason, a goddess cursed these lands. Since then, there was eternal winter, and with the appearance of the red moon came the long night, and monsters came out. Duke Bertrand's entire family was also cursed. She must have heard the rumors about the Duke, that he's obsessed with the curse. The warrior means he quenches his thirst with blood. Leon thinks this is untrue and calls it a curse, and that it actually makes a man insane. When the blood moon rises, Duke Bertrand and his successor seem like monsters obsessed with blood. Walking through the snow in the street, Leon turns to Daphne and says he has something to say. In the middle of the street, he kneels down and says that he and all the people of the Castle of Shadows are very grateful to her for becoming a duchess. He admits that this is a real blessing for them. However, he asks, in whatever form the Duke returns, not to leave him. The girl doesn't understand why Leon started this topic right here. She thinks he might have said it inside as well, since it's cold enough outside. She tells Leon that she will think about what he said, but first he needs to get off his knees. Watching all this from behind the door are Wessler and Adna. Wessler says Leon is a real good boy. There were different gods in this world that Daphne went to. For some reason, they decided to leave the human world. The goddess Daphne, who stayed until the very end, appointed one last sacred maiden before she left. And that sacred maiden was the protagonist of the novel, Flora. Daphne didn't yet understand why she too had Flora's powers, but they seemed to grow stronger as the red moon rose. She's thinking about all this while looking out the window. Suddenly, someone calls out to her from behind. It was Leon, who says he was looking for her. They returned to the Castle of Shadows 3 days ago. After she said she would think about Leon's request to not leave Kale, he came to see her every day and asked her if she had made a decision. Turning to the girl, he asks if she went out. Looking behind the girl's back, he realizes that she went to see the alchemist Adna again. Daphne realizes that she went there because he isn't there. Leon remembers what he was looking for the girl for and tells her he has something to show her. He hands her a roll-up and tells her that his sisters made this design. The guy says he wanted to demonstrate all the sketches in person. Daphne is surprised at the speed of the work. Leon says they do everything quickly, and here they must have been very enthusiastic. There was just some extra Bigfoot fur left in the warehouse, so he gave it to them. Daphne asks when she can see a sample. Beatrice is shocked and yells at him that he is out of his mind for having such whims. There is plenty of other food in the world, such as fish. Enya in turn yells that fish stinks and he doesn't want. Because of the red moon, it's dark all day long, so she can no longer sense time. She realizes that the castle is too quiet, which means it's nighttime. She says it's for the best and decides to go to the kitchen to eat bread and milk. At this time, 2 patrolmen are making their way around the corridors of the castle. One of them is a novice. The other guard with experience suggests that this must be the first time he is making his nightly rounds under the red moon. And out of the goodness of her heart, she decides to tell him that when the red moon appears, a strange energy starts to swirl around the castle. It gives me the creeps, especially at night like now. When walking down this corridor, which is only used by servants, a person may be followed by an unintelligible sound. They bump into Daphne walking down this corridor, and the newcomer starts screaming fearfully. She tries to ask him what he means, but Enya puts his finger to her lips and cryptically informs her that 3 glasses of water will do. Let Beatrice be careful. Daphne walks further down the corridor, thinking about why one of those guards was frightened, as if seeing a ghost. In her hands, she carries the lantern the knight gave her when they met. She assumes that Adney may be wandering around at this time. The young lady doesn't understand why she's been walking so long, but she still can't see the kitchen. She touches the wall and it begins to glow bright pink. The girl is frightened, trying to realize what it is. She finds herself on the floor, not realizing what has just happened. The Archduchess looks around and sees huge stone walls around her, as if she were in a cave. She notices a pink-colored rift in the ceiling and assumes that's where she fell from. She sees that it's too high up and there's no way for her to get up there. She can't think of anything better to do than just walk forward. The assumption that this is the secret passageway of the Shadow Castle comes to mind. Surely there must be a way out ahead. What's more important to the girl now is that she's too hungry, so she asks her stomach to stop rumbling. A short while later, she is still walking down the hallway and holding her stomach from hunger. Suddenly, she sees a huge passageway in front of her. She knew this tunnel was connected to another room. She walks through and sees symbols on every surface. Daphne realizes that these symbols are a divine language. an ancient language that is no longer spoken now, but before her are the writings of gods who have hidden their whereabouts on this earth. Daphne tries to understand what is happening. She knew that this castle had been built back in the days when gods still lived among humans. She wondered if she would have the same feeling if she found ancient cave paintings in the basement of the house. The Duchess had had a serious run-in with the deposed Empress just a decade ago, after which she had been banished. There had been many rumors as to why they didn't get along so well, but nothing had ever really been figured out. She seems to be able to make out the written words a bit, but no. The girl recognizes that there's nothing she can do this time. Probably only a priest of high rank will be able to read this, and he'll have to pay a lot for it. She touches the painted wall. Suddenly, all the symbols began to glow pink. Daphne gets a headache and hears a voice. He says he too believed, but he too was betrayed. He waited and will wait. He will never give up. The girl is still conscious and wants to call for help. There is too much noise in her head. Daphne wakes up, and there is a maid standing over her. She asks if Daphne is okay and says she was worried about her. They were all very worried. The princess gets out of bed and asks how long she slept. It turns out that she had been napping for 3 whole days. During that time, she has not opened her eyes once. Egmont suggests that her mouth must be very dry and offers her a drink of water. The butler announced the arrival of the Duchess of Gwent, and an elderly woman appeared before the aristocrats. The Marquis greeted his aunt, saying that it had been quite some— Egmont says that the girl should take some time off from work. He explains that she needs to recover, and her task now is to lie down and rest. He leaves the room and says he won't even think about leaving the room. In her head, Daphne thinks she's become the girl who went out for a snack at night and passed out. She thinks about what kind of room it was. It didn't look like a room that wasn't several thousand years old, but like it had been built recently. She wonders what that voice in her head was, and how she managed to get out of there. She looks at the glowing hand and realizes that it was clearly reacting to her power. She realizes that it's very similar to what happened to Flora in the novel. The unexpected red moonrise, the accidental discovery of the mystery room, and the reaction to the force. It was supposed to happen to Flora, but it seems to have happened to her. The problem is, this isn't the place, it's a shadow castle, and if this event really went to her in the Duchy of Bertrand, it should have been spring. Marielle runs into Daphne's room. She screams that there is trouble. The monsters are approaching the shadow castle. The girl goes out on the balcony and sees a dragon flying over the castle. She doesn't understand why this is happening right now, and decides she can't just watch it all and stand idly by. The others stand in a daze and don't know what to do. Only Daphne knows the weak spot of these monsters, and she wants to tell about it. In the story, Alan is nearly killed once by a monster that can only be killed by a blow to a vulnerable spot, as its hide gets harder with each attack. If this is the same monster that almost killed Alan, then his weak point is the white spot on the back of his neck. However, Daphne does not understand one thing: why the monster from the second part of the novel has appeared here and now. Sir Filbert and Edgemon look at the monster. This is the first time they have seen something like it. Phil notes that strange things have been happening lately. In addition to this monster, there have been many recorded sightings of unknown monsters. Naze didn't understand why the princess had suddenly decided to go for such a thing. The princess reminded Lupin that he was going to give her a lesson and asked him to come up to her and show her his talent. Now they are both worried about the Duke. They notice that all the monsters are acting strange. They are only circling at the top, as if they are looking for something. This is unusual behavior for them, but Egmont doesn't feel threatened by it. However, he wants to kill it just in case. There was one thing, however. The master asked the prince if he was sure of his decision, because the memories from this place would disappear. Egmont quickly runs up to the girl and drags her back, because he told her to rest in the room and says it's too dangerous here. She asks him to stop and points her finger at a white spot on his neck. He also offered to ride his highness on his back, but he didn't listen and asked why the weather changed each time she left and came back. Sonador told him that the territory of the sky. However, after the master herself falls asleep, there is little she can do to influence the process, and in her power only to predict her own awakening. Although in other people's dreams, Sonador is like a fish in water,
The main tone is, it turns out that the territory of the master of the dream is the earth. Everything that appears here is a reflection of the sleeper's consciousness, and even the entities are
The archer pulls her out of her thoughts and tells her to go inside, because it's very dangerous here. Eggman interrupts him and says that Daphne is now also mistress of the Bertrand house and should be used to hunting monsters, but he says that if she is afraid, she can leave.
The Duchess believed there was no need for the princess to force herself to marry someone like that. She had come all the way to Odin to tell Lupinia this, that Marquis Bastian would help her. Suddenly, Nice walked into the room with Tina, and that's when the heroine realized she was caught.
The arrow is fired and hits the monster's white spot. Eggman watches the monster fall and realizes that Daphne was right this time. He asks Filbert to take care of the girl.
The commander-in-chief said with a cold face that he would be back and waiting for heroine at the party. Valentina couldn't believe that Nice knew she was a woman. She had been humiliated by the princess, but something had...
The girl wonders why the monster is acting this way, but suddenly a spear flies past her and hits the monster right in the neck and it falls. It was Kale, and he asks if there are more monsters.
It didn't seem normal, so the heroine couldn't say for sure, but she wondered why the woman kept calling her Your Highness. Valentina stepped out into the hall, and everyone immediately recognized her.
He tells Sir Filbert to prepare the chains, also tells him to open the dungeon and bring in some knights. It looks like Kale is still trying to keep his wits about him, and Eggman will try to buy time. As he says this, he doesn't notice Daphne heading straight for Kale. Eggman notices this, but the girl is already standing right in front of the Duke. He yells that it's dangerous. Kale starts to speak and asks her to help him. She replies in a gentle voice that of course she will help, and leans her hand on his head. She says that's why she's here. The very next afternoon, Daphne is sitting in the living room with Kale asleep on her lap. He holds her hand tightly. He's calmed down and the expression on his face is peaceful. The Kale she'd seen that day was like a monster in human form, but at the same time she felt sorry for him.
Sonador let the light lilac butterfly land on her finger with trepidation. It had been so long since she had seen her perfume that she was surprised to see it soon.
To even imagine that it's the same person. That day was somehow unusual for Daphne. The moment her abilities touched Kale, both the blizzard and the red moon receded, as if a miracle had happened. And she also realizes for sure that that monster definitely smiled at her. That didn't happen in the novel. When Flora came here, she saw monsters for the first time. Nothing special happened in her previous life, but Daphne knows for sure that something important happened this time. There is a knock on the door, and Marielle walks in. She says it is time for Daphne to go see Sir Wessler. She turns to a sleeping Kale and says she'll be back soon. Daphne is already talking to Wessler. She wonders if it happened to the Duke because of the sudden increase in monsters. Wessler replies that that is correct. At first it was normal, but at some point there were more monsters and they behaved strangely.
The commander-in-chief approached Lupin, telling her not to run away from him. He was saying that there was something he couldn't let happen, after which Valentina didn't know why the man was looking at her with such a hard stare, which was not there before. Suddenly, Felix came up to Tina, asking what was wrong, as the girl looked rather pale.
Daphne was glad to hear that. There was a reason she ran to Adna every chance she got and asked her to hurry up. She was hiding from Leon there too, so he wouldn't bother her. In return, she was able to provide Adna with expensive materials that she had to spend a lot of money on. Daphne is still making money from the hot spring after all.
They were simply lifted back from the depths of his subconscious, and all thanks to his great faith in animals, which even summons spirits. At these words, Marmel realized finally that he was being mocked.
Body. You can't go anywhere in such a form. One aristocrat man was recommended by this source, but he couldn't even cover his nose with his hands because they stink. He took Marquis Burdett's word for it and came here and was disappointed. Marquis bangs his fist on the table and asks what's going on. He yells at his daughter, Darren Burdett, and recalls that she was confident of success. And now, because of a stupid source, Burdett's name is tarnished. Duran says she did everything according to the recipe, but Marquis doesn't want to hear it and asks her to get out of her sight. Marquis says that if she was going to copy the recipe, she should have done it properly.
Tina turned the man down, saying that she was going back to the party with Felix. The couple left, leaving.
Darren lies wrapped in a blanket on her bed. She doesn't understand how Marquis could say that she is worse than some commoner. He himself said it was a good idea and asked her to promote it. She realizes that now is not the time to shed tears. But after all, she did everything right. She practically copied the structure of the hot springs and used the same herbs, but she was definitely missing something. Duran wants to recheck the temperature of the water and the order in which the fragrant herbs are added, so that their hot springs are no different from the princess's hot springs, thereby proving that she is no worse than Daphne. Next day, Daphne sits at her desk and writes a letter to Count Komen. She writes to him that the Red Moon period, which came sooner than expected, is finally over. She is pleased that his lands have not suffered much.
Lying in bed with Tina, Felix recalled their recent conversation where he had asked the girl to break her engagement to the commander and become betrothed to him. The Bastion family had promised that they would.
She recalled that yesterday she had been able to verify the information Sir Wessler had given her. The main reason for everything was in that room, so immediately after the tea party was over, she went there again and transcribed every word that was written there.
The man assured her that they didn't need all the details, and a small amount of information would be enough for them. Tina didn't understand why Felix needed the instructions for the vaccine, while the man said it was if the girl could find out about the vaccine, she would have the power to control Nysa as much as she wished. The princess didn't take her word for it, telling the man to prove his intentions with action.
The reason why she needed the name of Count Komen, who would commission a high-ranking priest to do the translation, was simple: to avoid the emperor's attention. After the gods left the human world, there had been strife between the imperial palace and the temple for many years. If he let Lupia go, it would seem to him that he would lose her forever, so he had unwittingly crossed the line. Nysa didn't understand why the princess was still lying in that cold underground temple. The man had to go there, but they were able to avoid imperial scrutiny, and Duke Bertrand's family was under the emperor's scrutiny. If Daphne wanted to contact the temple using that name, the first thing she'd have to worry about would be the Duke. She is lucky that Count Komen's wife is a pious woman. Daphne approaches Marielle and asks her to send the letter, along with a bag of gold, to Count Komen. Marielle obeys and takes the letter with her.
When she opened the door, the heroine was surprised, because she didn't expect a place like this to be clean, since no one had used it for a long time. It was strange that this place seemed very familiar to Heroine, and she was sure that there was something there. The prince did not understand why the master did not like everything, and she answered that she was still an animal in his eyes, and it should not be so. Then Marmel affronted her with the question whether he should speak of sympathy as a human being.
The path that was blocked because of the Red Moon is open again, so the goods he couldn't get are being delivered now. He sees that many gifts have been brought in for the girl and Kale. Daphne once again interjects about the gifts. Eggman says these are souvenirs from those families who suffered because of the Lasmeltear incident. Gold, silk, and jewelry were sent from the capital and eastern lands, while a letter of thanks, fruits, and other gifts came from the kingdom of Lasmeria.
This was done by taking the lives of young people who were children of God, where their blood was used. The children of God were found in the north of the empire, near the northern city, and they were brought to the palace.
Daphne thought. She also notices a letter of some sort. It turns out to be from the imperial palace, and judging by the seal belonging not to the emperor personally, but to the imperial palace, it is likely that this letter was sent by Alan, and the second letter came from the Marquis Elmiller family. Daphne realizes that she can read it here as well. She acts out that she is not feeling well, and says that she should have taken Eggman's advice and rested in her room, and says she will go to her room. She thinks there is no way to open the letter from Alan in front of him. She realizes that she should read it sooner, destroy it, and say that it was just a welcome note. As Daphne leaves the street, Phil notices that the Duchess probably wants to hide something.
The heroine thought Leon was in more pain than she had ever been in. Lupania became a child of God because she knew everything all along. Valentina's 8th life was Lupinia's. Suddenly, the princess's in it, under the guise of a letter of greeting, there was an ordinary threat. He asked Daphne to sit quietly in the north because there is no telling what may come into the emperor's mind. Daphne, after reading it, throws the paper into the fireplace. Everything went as the heroine expected, and her mother, the empress, was happy. After that day, she moved into the underground temple of the imperial sanctuary of Rojas, and there were guards there in case she decided. Luna told the high priest that they should not proceed any further, for Lupania had passed out last time and there was no place on her arm to prick. The man assured that it was Her Majesty's order, and if they didn't collect the required amount,
Thanks to them, she and her friends were safe. She would like to visit the Shadow Castle in person, to thank the Duchess in person. She writes that if she has the opportunity, she would be honored to receive Daphne's invitation. Lupania woke up saying that here they were finally meeting. The princess said that their souls split when she fell, and that could also be what the Lord wanted. Since then, the princess was doing this to complete her life, and the heroine knew it as well as she did. The punishment the Lord had assigned them meant that they had to bear the burden of 9 human lives. Through her tears, Lupania saw Nisa, not stopping to say that she had done everything she could, and from now on, the heroine would have to continue living this life and take care of the commander-in-chief, for he was that child. Not quite right. The man shoved Valentina aside, and picking up Lupania asked her to open her eyes. If, at some point, he could see her again, he would want to beg her forgiveness for making the Lord hate her. Then Nise did meet her, and Lupania was a guard sent by her mother to watch over him. The heroine realized that Isle Naze was Leon. As soon as he speaks of Daphne, he disappears at the same moment. The girl understands that Sir Leon is avoiding her, but she does not understand the reason for this behavior. She thinks that something is wrong with the specimen she promised to show him. The man could be left alone, unable to end this terrible curse, for this vicious cycle could continue. Now that Nice thought about it, he began to wonder if this was how Lupin pulled his tricks. He understood why the Earl. Niall revealed that he knew the heroine was a spy from Saren. He was curious how she would react when she realized she had been exposed, but the ridiculous excuse that she was a princess was quite. Nise began to think that he should have killed Valentina earlier, but suddenly Julian asked the commander to stop. The lieutenant said that Lupinia's body was lying on the cold ground. Then the man walked over to her body and ordered him to pick up Lupin. At the estate of the Marquis of Bastion, Felix came to Hans Breiger, who was in their dungeon. He took the man to the dining room and showed him a picture of the princess, where he told him that it was definite. Tina lived like this while her poor father was left to fend for himself. The man began to ask if Felix wanted him to confirm that the princess was a fake. The young man said that after this conversation, Felix reported to his father what had happened. It was confirmed that the woman pretending to be the princess was Tina Breiger. The Marquis couldn't believe how this was their chance, since they could still cut off the commander-in-chief's head for treason. Tina was afraid that the commander would abandon and forget her, so Felix had planted her livelihood, and the Marquis praised the work, saying that all they had to worry about now was the vaccine, because they had to get it to be able to take the throne. The artificial vaccine was a fake, and the Marquis realized that they must have used the real Lupania in some way, and she was the only one who could make a vaccine like the child of God. The young man began to remember how the Marquis had killed the man in the store while he was still a boy sitting in the closet. Suddenly, an unknown man brought the boy in, saying he was hanging around idly outside the door. Bastion removed the pendant. Felix, in his thoughts, asked to wait for the Marquis Bastion for the moment when he would stand before the imperial throne and he would kill him. Nysa stood at Lupinia's grave, paying no attention to the pouring rain. Especially since she had seen his curse. He said that's why Mistress was looking for him. These words made the girl laugh. Leon asked why she was laughing, to which she replied that it was such a silly thing to say. After all, if she wanted to leave the Duke, she wouldn't have looked for him, but would have just left. Seeing the devastated commander-in-chief, Kiki didn't understand where he could have been walking in such heavy rain. It became more important to her that Nise was dressed in mourning attire.
The reporter didn't see anyone mentioned. Later, the man went to the dungeon, asking if the soldiers had gotten a confession. The soldier apologized, saying that the only thing they had heard in the last 3 days was a request to meet with Nice. In the interrogation room, the lieutenant argued that they already knew that they had been sent to them by Earl Grey, so she should have confessed everything, whether he had ordered the murder of the princess and how much the Earl knew about Her Highness. The heroine's real name was Valentina. One day she met Leon, saying that he was beautiful enough to charm her Valentina, so she would send him a proper blessing and he would not fall ill of any disease, and his blood would be... The voice said that whether or not this would actually be a blessing, Leon would understand throughout her life. Lufinia had once asked Nisa if they should just run away, if they could forget about the vaccine, and the woman screamed that the commander-in-chief was a traitor and should be arrested as a traitor for endangering the entire empire. Lupinia ran out to the man, thinking that she could not lose him again. The Empress had said that she could take Nisa. The girl had to think hard before she acted. In the next flashback, the princess had too much blood taken, and she did not regain consciousness, and her heart stopped. Presently, Valentina, through tears, asked to call for Nisa, after which she promised to tell him everything. The man stepped in, saying that he would personally listen to the princess's killer, so Julian needed to leave them alone for a while. The commander-in-chief asked to continue, because telling him everything from beginning to end without a single lie could serve the girl better. The heroine began to ask whether the man was eating well and whether he was still... There were herbs in her bedroom drawer, and Nise should have made tea. Suddenly emotional, the man lashed out at Valentina, asking what she was trying to accomplish. The commander recognized that the girl had been very persuasive before. Their family. Even though he had his suspicions about her, the man was awed by her violet eyes. Her violin performance, her lips, and her pathetic attempts to make him think of... When the time came and the heroine's identity was revealed, Nice was still trying to find excuses to keep her by his side. The man couldn't understand why Valentina had killed an innocent man. He wanted to hear why he should keep the girl alive. The heroine abruptly pounced on Nice and started kissing him. Suddenly, the commander-in-chief smelled the same scent from the girl that the princess had. The man lashed out, asking... The older girl was amazed, and the young man in green replied that since Daphne believed in them, they should believe in themselves. The older girl was amazed, and the young man in green replied that since Daphne believed in them, they should believe in themselves. Their family will try their best to make a dress even better than this one, and Lexi guarantees it. But to everyone's surprise, the Duchess said she won't be needing a dress. The outfit they'll be presenting will be a costume for the Grand Duke. If they wanted to produce vaccines in the future, Nisa would need to handle her with care. The man ordered silence, for they couldn't trust a spy. Then the girl grabbed a pen and cut her hand. If Naze needed blood, she had plenty of it. They could get some holy water. Now they could see if she was telling the truth. The man thought the heroine had lost her mind, but the woman said she would no longer let Nise carry this burden alone. The girl promised to bring everything back. The commander-in-chief remembered telling the princess that her scent was beautiful. Lupania didn't know that Nice was the type of person who noticed another person's scent. The man understood what the girl meant. He had never really noticed it with anyone else but her. Celebrated their majority. After listening to the young lady, Carol understood and said that if they made the children's clothes to look like adult clothes, they would still look different. Maury got sad and said he was already excited and thought they were going to sew for Daphne. And a sad Lexi thought the same thing. Lupania asked if the commander had slept last night and how many days it had been. It was normal for Nisa. It seemed to the girl that he had nightmares whenever he tried to sleep. The man in the dream was a very frightening person, and he couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Then he'd been stabbed with something sharp. Nise thought that maybe he had committed a sin in his past life, but it was all right now because he was near the princess. And currently, Luna argued that it was impossible because there had never been a case of several gods' children appearing at the same time. Julian was so shocked by these words that he almost fainted.
In the affirmative, for she had been on everyone's lips lately, having caught the crooks.
The priest thought that since the girl was a spy from Sarin, she could lie to survive. Luna added the heroine's blood to the holy water and it began to glow. And that's when they realized that Valentina was indeed God's child.
Has fallen in love with this commoner princess, and she thought that the girl would be so despised there that she would die quickly. When she heard this, a blonde-haired young man with books in his hands, who was walking down the palace corridor, yawned and asked what it meant. The servant girl stammered and exclaimed that it was Prince Claire. He asked the maids what they had just been talking about. He asked the maids what they were talking about, but the prince interrupted her and asked why they couldn't say it directly. Then he asked them if they had bitten their tongue.
The relationship between the godchild and the vaccine was a secret even within the Empire, so Nice couldn't understand how the spy from Sarin had learned this information. Valentina said that the Count had told her nothing, and all he wanted. The heroine had no idea how much Earl Grey knew, but she was sure he didn't know who she was. The girl assumed that since Nice kept mentioning Sarin, he still didn't believe her. The man thought that the girl would feel better after. Marmel sat down on the grass, leaning on his knees, and began to ponder Sonador's words, not understanding why she would want him to be honest with his own feelings. For it could turn out that the mastermind would leave him when the truth was revealed. It had been a few minutes since the guide had disappeared, but the prince already missed her and waited for her return. He had kept her with him out of interest, because in his ideal world she was the only talking creature.
The red-haired girl was surprised and asked about the swindlers, but she was ignored.
The girl is really cute, especially when she's making disgruntled faces, but she's also witty, energetic, and timely cowardly and brave, like all the animals she's come to see him as.
Asked again about the hot springs.
Normally, Marmel could easily read the intentions of the people around him, so he thought it would be just as easy with her.
The other girl was disappointed that although she had managed to sign up for the Bertrand Hot Springs after sending 3 servants, she would have to wait for 3 months.
He had even gotten to thinking that he cared about her, an adorable little beast who is actually a real person with long red hair, just as she described herself.
After all, she had already been to other springs.
Marmel paved to reflect on his losses, which were due to his own folly and failure, and on the loneliness that had become his only faithful companion.
Terrible, unsanitary. One of the girls at the tea party was getting annoyed. Deron was not happy, for she had done the same thing. "Nothing can replace the beautiful scenery that opens up at those springs," said one of the gentlemen next to her. As she listened, Deron countered in her head that there was something to see at Burdett Manor too. And there were no monsters to fear, for they were not there.
But for some reason, Marmel always looks forward to Sonador invading his sleep once again, calling out to him, bossing him around as if he were at home, stirring up his half-forgotten painful memories.
Return in the north.
Now the prince was afraid that at some point the girl would run away and leave him alone with madness again. The prince was afraid that at some point the girl would run away and leave him alone again.
Then hot springs at the ball.
Now, remembering the embrace with his favorite vixen, Marmel was sure that he was ready for anything. So his only wish was that the master fox would not leave. Mel, bored under a blossoming peach tree, catching the falling petals, heard a noise behind him. He was called again by a native voice that he would not confuse with any.
In the western part of the market stall district, the upcoming ball was also being discussed, specifically at the Soul Shop. The ash-haired man turned his gaze to the document and said that even the former duke's wedding was rather modest. That's why there was so much talk around. He asked if the man would go. He said that he had to go there anyway, otherwise he would not get the right to export petroleum products. The owner of the voice we don't know had a request. He asked to tell the man who the commoner princess of the north was. The ash-haired man was surprised, for he would not provide this information for nothing. In return, his interlocutor would share with him what kind of terrific thing would be presented at the ball.
She was worried about something else. The deadline was approaching, and it would be impossible to meet again without a long rest. Sonia told Mel that this might be their last meeting, for the time allotted for the emperor's mission, and if the prince never woke up, all dissentients, including her, would be exterminated. It was possible that the situation would change if she succeeded, but failure would prove to be a good reason for
He understands perfectly well that the prince is anxious, but Princess Daphne is the consort of Duke Bertrand. Their family has a unique right to conduct business. Princess Daphne is Claire's sister, and he has no right to speak ill of her. Finally, saying it was late, his father sent him to rest in his room. As he accompanied his son, the king noticed a letter from Edenia Brinton. It said that the atmosphere at the Duke's estate was rather cold.
However, Mel knew for a fact that those people did not show symptoms of insanity, and therefore the question of black magic being involved in the prince's case remained open.
Pretended to have a good relationship with each other.
Marmel asked why the craftswoman had not told him about it earlier, to which she replied that it would not have sped up the process anyway, but rather loaded it with unnecessary thoughts that would have distracted from the work.
The Duke's manor. Daphne looked around to see if anyone was around. She had told Marielle earlier that if anyone asked her, she should say that the mistress was drinking tea or resting, and mentioning the maid checking, she recounted the same. The personal maid asked where she was going.
But honestly, it wasn't like His Majesty cared about cause and effect. He was simply demanding her participation. Now the girl was no longer sure of anything.
Imagine where she'll go now.
Except that Marmel knew his father well. He assumed in his thoughts that it was likely that the emperor was aware that this wasn't about the curse. And in case the prince doesn't eventually come to his senses, the curse will be the perfect excuse in the eyes of his loyalties to carry out genocide. It turns out he's still obsessed with the idea of a massacre. However, just as Sonia said, there is no guarantee that even after success, the emperor will not touch anyone and the lives of the dissentients will remain at risk. We will have to act according to the situation.
Turning her attention to the cloth-covered furnishings, she realized that perhaps the place they had come to was the same forbidden place in the Shadow Castle that had become so after the Duchess's death.
The prince, stroking the soft, fluffy deer's tail, asked if Sonia had shared details and conjectures with his father. Naturally, no, and that was the best part.
Thinking about the guy coming here and acting so calm.
The prince smiled broadly and said that it was better that Descensia's curse remained the cause of his ailment. The girl was puzzled. His phrase sounded as if he wished death to all the masters, rather than wishing to. Marmel narrated that if one carefully studied the original historical notes, the last descendant of the originally cursed imperial family was Luke VII,
ruler of this empire. If there really is something, he will not silently put it down.
He was aware of his destiny and knew that he would fall asleep on the day of his majority, so he searched with all his might for a way to break the curse. The road led him to an island where he learned God's will.
The elder prince wondered why Daphne had stopped listening to him.
The prophecy was rather vague and sounded like this: "The end of the path will be laid by new blood, the blood that gave it its beginning." This statement could be understood and interpreted in different ways.
A little in her previous life, but to songs that did not exist here.
Terrified at the prospect of his own destruction, Luca understood him literally and verbatim. He decided that he had to shed the blood of the dissentients who had put a terrible curse on him, and as a result, he carried out a massacre that claimed hundreds of lives. By his own stupidity, he had signed his own death warrant for himself and a lot of innocent people. And the girl remembered the story, which any dissentient had heard at least once.
Of himself.
The prince decided it would be an excellent idea to use this prophecy to his advantage, interpreting the new blood as a descendant of the dissentients, that is, a master like Sonador herself. In confirmation of these words, she would awaken him. It wasn't a bad plan. If the emperor believed that only dissentients could break the curse, genocide could be avoided. Sonador raised her head to the prince and asked to save also her assistant, who is.
As soon as he left, the symptoms of the curse suddenly appeared. The imperial family assured him that they would keep the cause of my mother's death and the truth about my curse a secret.
There's a good chance he'll have to risk everything he has upon awakening, and he wasn't the only one, so the first thing he had to do was get out of oblivion.
Didn't seem to have seen any mention of his visit before. It was as if someone wanted to hide this information, and that requires the utmost sincerity. Sonador looked Marmel straight in the eye and said that no matter what he said, she swore that her attitude towards him would not change, and she would continue to support. After a pause, the prince leaned down to the top of the beast's head and whispered that he seemed to really like Sonador. With those words, he kissed her forehead gently. Sonador sensed the prince's excitement and asked if he was really so afraid of facing reality. It was true. He was afraid that everything there was still black and white and blurry, and that when he returned, it would be even worse. She was delighted to see her, but at half a word, she was accosted by Mother Elmail. They were very grateful to the lady for the invitation, and the woman who spoke it introduced herself as the wife of the Marquis of Elmail, Idel. She was delighted to welcome the Duchess. She added that she was already very attached to him, so she wouldn't leave him in the lurch, no matter what happened. That's how bonds between people work. Marmel blushed at her words and warned her that she could not take back what she had. Time to wake up. And it did work. Marmel opened his eyes and put his hand to his forehead, numb from his long immobility. Everything was as gray and gloomy as before. But she is saddened by the fact that recently people forget about it. He felt breath and familiar warmth beside him. He put his free arm around the girl and fumbled with her fluffy hair, which was gathered into a bundle. It was frightening, but at the same time, it was maddeningly curious to see his friend. With its antlers. Marmel resolutely shifted his gaze to the master sleeping next to him, her head resting peacefully on his chest. She lifted her head, sensing movement, and revealed herself in full glory, indeed, like a fox. Last time Elmel sided with Alan because of this, but in the end, the mistake only made things worse for the family. When Daphne meets Adel's gaze, she realizes that this time will be different. Marmel noticed with a soft smile that the master's head was in place, which he was immensely pleased about. He had a different impression of the girl than he had in his dream. Perhaps it was his hoarse voice. As she looked out the window, the Duchess heard Lady Catherine call out to her. She was glad that they had finally met in person. The girl approached Daphne, saying that she was upset because her mother had prevented them from having a quiet chat. Stammering, the craftswoman could find no words and could say nothing better than the joy of Mel's awakening. He said it was all thanks to the guide. The Duchess thanked her for the compliment. She's glad Catherine could come. For to be honest, Daphne had never given such a reception. The lady immediately began to cheer her on, for her mistress had done so well. Catherine is honored to be invited by her. Daphne is happy to have her support. When Hagit finished his business, he concluded with the phrase that thanks to the supporting magic, His Highness's body would be fine. Due to the long stay in a coma, he would be slowed down for a while, but the ailment would pass quickly. Duchess is sweet and innocent. As he buttoned his shirt, the prince recognized the voice of the court healer. He still couldn't see his face, so he used the skills he'd learned before falling asleep. Now it was time for the Duchess to go as well. All those present in the ballroom were amazed, for the ballroom was lovely. It is quite difficult to prepare such a wonderful ball. No one could have thought of such a thing, but when you think about it, the cursed mad Archduke and his commoner wife. The prince noticed that there were 3 people in the room, the voices belonging to men. One of them clearly belonged to the knight, and the other, apparently Sonia's assistant, was just as Others think that the commoner must have been dizzy with all these riches of the duchy. The guests also say that she doesn't even know etiquette, but she still pretends to be a lady. They think that the Duchess is a despicable peasant. As the doors to the ballroom opened, the entrants were announced, namely, the Archduke of Betrayal and his consort. Everyone at the ball was speechless. The only thing that went through everyone's mind was that the couple looked beautiful. At the same time, he whispered to his mistress that the healer was very skillful at pretending to be normal in front of the prince, using his healing power of authority. It was funny to watch Hagit. Meanwhile, Marmel asked the knight to come closer to him. He said he was aware of the time limit given by the emperor to the master to cure his illness. The knight said that there were only 3 days left before it was over. Expensive,
From the voice, Mel recognized Christian. The prince asked to report to His Highness on his awakening, and the rest he wished to announce in person after the amendment at the audience. In the meantime, he demanded silence. The prince's word was law, so the knight obeyed his order without question. Mel thanked Christian and said that what he needed now was peace. The knight understood and said he would take everyone out of the
Kale asked the Duchess what they were for. The Duchess answered that they are necessary for beauty, because soon the whole high society will wear them. Thus, there will be a new trend. One of the guests noticed this item. The ash-haired man exclaimed to himself that this was an exceptional piece. With glasses in their hands, everyone present began to discuss the outfits of the Archduke and his wife as if they had been created by fairies. And although fairies is an understatement, but aren't their outfits marvelous? Sonador didn't understand what was happening, but to Marmel, it was as it should be. It seemed to her that he still saw her as an animal, not a human being, even though she was in her true form. High spirits. The prince replied that this was not at all true, but then he should have explained why he was not at all embarrassed by the position in which they were sitting. Mel slyly pulled the master into his lap and enjoyed her company. Only briefly, everything was within reason for him, but the girl had wrested her right to sit at least next to him. A good argument would have been the position in which she lay on top of him while she was asleep, but Sonia replied that it was part. Then Marmel decided to continue the therapy and rested his head on the girl's shoulder. Now he was freezing without her warmth and wanted his dose of therapeutic embrace. But his behavior was like a child's whim. Sonador asked why the prince had sent the others away, to which he replied briefly, they were all in his way. He wanted to be alone with the one he liked, and they would only be extra ears and eyes. Sonia seemed to be acting confused, but Mel grabbed her cheek and pulled her to him, directly admitting that he liked her as a girl. It was her and no one else. Durand said she was really looking forward to seeing them. Daphne, on the other hand, thought that one was the most plagiaristic of them all. The embarrassed craftswoman stared into the prince's eyes for a while, then realized he meant romantic interest. And that's the real problem. There was a terrible stench there, and the water temperature wasn't stable either. Soon, everyone began to criticize the place. In the future, Marmel will become an emperor, and the fact that such a man had feelings not for his real bride, but for someone inappropriate in status, a representative of the lower class, and a master from the captured island, a real disaster. Only Sonador has found a way to escape, as a new threat catches up with her. The emperor would kill her if he found out. But then she remembered that Mel was a romantic by nature, and therefore the feelings. Sonia declared that His Highness was mistaken. He had become attached to her while she was in the guise of a cute animal, but that was no reason for love. The prince tried to stop her monologue. The lady was very impolite, and her family was neglecting the Beautrand family. But the girl went on to say that he was mistaking sympathy for love. It happens when you open up to a person's innermost feelings and find comfort. But secrets always come out. Lady Burdett has completely lost her spirit in this dialogue. Marmel grabbed the girl's hand and asked her to call him by his first name, as in a dream. He thought he had made himself clear and wondered what else he could do to make Sonia understand his feelings. And wait until Daphne called her. The lady meekly agreed to this. Mrs. Beautrand thought that all the accumulated rumors about fake hot springs might have cooled her down, but it didn't. She even empathizes with her a little. The decoration of the Duchess's springs, their beautiful service, the flower petals on the water. No wonder someone had tried to copy her idea. But she found out that Darren had managed to copy the blueprints for all the internal utilities, plumbing and boiler. And that's impressive. It's hard to imagine the work she did. She seemed to have an amazing talent for engineering. She'd never been mentioned in the book, and Daphne hadn't met her in her previous life. The incident with the sources had soured their relationship, but maybe she could get her on her side. Sonador supported him, saying that such things happened, but the prince still insisted on her company until he sorted out his feelings, for she herself had promised to be by his side until the very end. Throwing a ball was so hard. She remembered that it was a slightly different promise. She wanted to say it, but she couldn't say a word, not knowing why. feigned tears as she looked at the lady. She replied that it brought back memories of her first ball. In the meantime, Hagit continued to drive Terry crazy with a play of homemade but unexplained puppets of Sonador, Marmel, and Terry. He jokingly played out the family drama of the new father's non-acceptance. Terry watched contemptuously, and the healer only said he was projecting his unspoken worries. The master's assistant was so desperate that he was ready to write a complaint for insulting the ruling family. And the tears were gone. The only thing that interested her now was how Lady Idel Elmail would describe the incident to the Emperor. Idel was shocked. She hoped the lady had a good sense of humor. She seemed to be old for such jokes. Terry sincerely didn't understand why this was happening. After all, the terms of the deal had been brilliantly fulfilled on time, but the knight walked away, leaving the lad without an answer. And she would tell someday. As they left the ballroom, Marquise's consort Elmail was thinking about what the Duchess had said earlier. It seemed that His Majesty wanted to reassure Marquise. He could have given her a seat. It was just worth mentioning Grand Duke Bernard. Terry was worried for both himself and his mistress. She would probably be lucky, for the prince was particularly particular about her and would surely protect her, but he could only hope to stay alive. The healer stretched and hummed a song as if he were not in a dungeon. He stopped in front of Terry and asked, stone-faced, if Dolios was dead. Summer passes and the severe cold of fall comes. The Marquise's consort will seek protection for herself. And then she would remember the words of the Duchess. Now Idel, that was all nerves, realized it. Leaning, she realized clearly now, the Empress was only trying to take advantage of her. However, this powerful magician neglected his apprentice and did not teach him at all, thinking that he was not capable of doing great things in the name of Ark anyway. In this situation, the boy was no different from the servants. If he wasn't going to teach him anything, the apprentice who had served him for 7 years was not going to put up with such an arrogant and unreasonable decision at all. All of Dolios's knowledge was stored in a book that the apprentice had stolen and escaped. It could be considered as payment for all the hard work. After escaping, the lad discovered a talent for healing magic and began training in the healing arts under the tutelage of an experienced healer, and then continued his way into the palace thanks to his giftedness and diligence. In terms of conditions, and the real knowledge that he absorbed, like a sponge from that book, it was difficult to even imagine, because after his death, Dolios left nothing of his research, only rumors and speculation. No one had gotten a contract yet. With those words, Hagit swung his hand and instantly opened the bars of the grate, opening the way out. So he had more than just healing magic, which the healer responded to only with his filigree talent. Up to her, she was silent at first, but as soon as she heard the Duke say that she should go and rest, she answered him in the healthiest voice in the world that she was all right. As if mocking her, though he did not mean it, he asked why there were so few people here today. On the way, the healer told me that he had other magic that was not too complicated and was completely within his control, such as elemental magic. With such powers, he could do more important things, but he was just a simple healer. Elle was extremely surprised. She wondered who it was. And the ash-haired man introduced himself. His name is Ines Cannon, and he is from the family of Viscount West Cannon. The Duchess was shocked. Was this man still in the Empire? This information was of no use to the Duke. He had never heard of such a family. The insecure young man said it's because the mansion is on the outskirts. And even though the business is many generations old, it is small. They only supply rice and wheat. Their business is not that popular. Daphne agreed with that. The family's holdings are small. Hagit opened the door to the chambers where His Highness should now be resting to ask for freedom. But in no way did the two expect to see an intimate picture. The prince sat in Sonador's arms, savoring the scent of her lush hair. Listening to this further, the princess didn't bother to listen. It wasn't long before the pair had a conversation. Sonador, blushing and averting her gaze, asked the prince what he would do if it turned out that he really liked her. The Archduchess said they would make a few more adjustments. Marmel was puzzled that even in such things, the master needed logic. He just wants to be happy like everyone else. Thing done. Bail would be paid in advance, and the commission would be 7%. He understood everything except for one thing, what she meant by guild. Daphne, on the other hand, explained, "The head of the Lunar Information Guild is Iris Cannon. She's his twin sister. No matter how much he pretends, he can't fool the Duchess. She knows many things about him. For example, Canon Yensik and Yenga are actually descendants of the Amelie Kingdom." Preparing her mistress for bed, the personal maid said she would leave the water for washing here. Then she asked if Daphne was going to go to bed later than usual. Daphne said the woman was right. After the ball, several days passed. Sonador warned that a man of unearthly beauty should be careful with such words, because it would not take long to pull his heart out of his chest. For more effect, she decided to squeeze Mel's hand and continued. Engineer. She was given the condition to expand her vision of the world and make sure to enter Ryun's guild. As she gazed into the water, she realized that she now had no choice but to wait for the Ryun guild to contact her. She only nodded, calling him a genius of pure beauty. Then the prince asked if her assistant was handsome, but he didn't get a clear answer. Two completely different guys can't be compared. The fabric of the mask and ordered her to get up. As she stood up, the Duchess saw the woman's face, who immediately said that she had better not make a fuss. The uninvited guest demanded answers to her questions. How did Daphne know that her brother and sister were descendants of the Amelia kingdoms, and that she was the head of the Ryan Guild? And it's not the kind of information that's easy to find. After all the above, Daphne realized who was now pointing a sword at her. It was Heirs Cannon. She thought she was going to get a letter or something, but it was more fun than that. She hustled down from the bed and said that the prince's taste was very peculiar. The girl complained of a fever because of the prince's hot words. The problem with everything was that, being an animal, she had a very different perception of the prince and her person. She replied that if Heirs destroyed the identity of the bluebird, wouldn't she destroy the right to be one? The guild leader replied that, considering how slow he was, she thought he had excellent stamina. The master stated that she was aware of the presence of a bride for the prince. She had heard of the beautiful Lady Anderson, whom she had actually learned about from Mel's memories. And though the prince has no romantic feelings for her, the lady herself, after all, she asked him to kill the imperial family, and the Mainton Heath in the county of Brington, the tears of Lasmal tricksters, and the alchemist who created them, Adney. This time, even the lineage of a minor nobleman from the western region. The girl only replied that she would keep her promise and stay by his side until the prince was restored. She was interrupted by the stern voice of the prince, who had come close behind her. Then the prince put his palm to the girl's eyes, imitating what he sees with his own eyes, and asked what she would do if she saw the world like this. Even people through this black spot, behind which it is not clear what a person looks like, even when a knight stands beside Marmel, called to protect him, he sees him only as a threat, a monster waiting for the moment to chew his head off. Round, the lad saw a view of the Duchess's chambers. What he saw shocked him. Slowly taking his hand away from Sonador's face, the prince admitted that he felt similar on a daily basis when looking at any person. He wondered if the masteress were in his place, if she could see people in those blank faces. That the Ryan Guild doesn't accept it is a lie. In a maddening manner, she continued that it must be all at the request of the aristocracy. She knows everything. And as Canon Yon already knows, Daphne is an orphan and a commoner. She was in an orphanage before the emperor adopted her to improve his reputation. However, shortly after finding a new family, the home completely burned down in a fire for an unknown reason, and the Ryan Guild investigated the incident. Their conversation was interrupted by the Archduke appearing out of nowhere with a sword in his hands. Calmly accepting the situation, Heirs said it was unexpected to see him here. Kale ignored her as he swung his weapon. For the uninvited guest, what was happening was getting more and more interesting. After a while, all their self-confidence gave way to fatigue from the protracted battle. Watching the whole spectacle sitting there, Daphne wondered when they would finish. She wants to sleep at night, but she had to get up from her seat so she wouldn't miss the moment to get into their duel. And so, Kale, who had gotten the advantage, wanted to wound Heirs, but stopped as soon as the Duchess covered Canon Yon, who was her guest. A few days later, Looking at the amazing thing for her, Daphne said it looked like a simple earring, but it allows you to communicate with each other. In her previous life, the Duchess had never heard of such a magical instrument. This unusual object a few days ago had fallen into her hands. That's when Ayres' cannon showed up. When Daphne had stopped the sword fight between Kale and Ayres, the latter had thrown it at her and asked her to wear them instead of earrings. He left without another word. In the following days, although the conversation with Ayres went well, there was a problem. Kale started avoiding her. She didn't understand. Maybe it was just her imagination. Each time she was told he wasn't in the Oval Office. Daphne would then call him in for a cup of tea or a snack. And so, looking at another rejection reply, she wondered if he was mocking her. After all, on a chance encounter, he passes it by. The princess thought she might have made some mistake. At this time, the Archduke's schedule for the day ends, and the secretary dared to ask Kale a question. Allowed to speak, the secretary continued calmly, asking if the Duke and Duchess had a quarrel. Hasn't he been refusing to see the Grand Duchess for the last few days? There's a lot of talk in the castle about it. Feeling uncomfortable, Kale said it wasn't true. There was just too much worry in his head. The secretary, on the other hand, understood in his own way. The Duke walked on, but turned abruptly and told him to postpone the rest of his business for another time. And the secretary decided that love was the problem. Apparently, he had reached the age of puberty. As she sipped her brewed tea, the Duchess thought about how nice the weather was. Maybe she should invite Marielle for a picnic. The servant girl said that His Highness was inviting his mistress for a cup of tea. Daphne turned her attention to him. Now sitting across from her with a mug of tea in his hands, Kale couldn't say a word in this situation, and it was the same with her. Setting the mug down, he asked if she remembered what he'd said earlier. She was Empress before she became Grand Duchess, and he had asked her to be careful. Daphne thought it must have bothered him that Ayres' cannon had come to her in the middle of the night. She said she would try to be more careful in the future. After that, he said that he was going to keep his promise to kill the members of the imperial family by taking their place. But to fulfill that promise, he only wants her by his side. Kale has a lot more questions for Daphne. Things he not only doesn't understand, but can't find any explanation for. But he won't require her to explain herself about everything right now. Until the Duke ascends to the throne as the Duchess desires, he will be there to protect her. He asked only to be told when she wanted to talk to him. The young man's flushed face made itself known. The princess's mood lifted, and she said she would tell him someday. Back to work, Daphne received from her maid all the letters that had been received today. Thanking Marielle, the mistress said she would look at them later. The maid also said that a special letter had come along with everything, a handwritten letter sent by the emperor himself. With a sharp turn of her attention to this particular letter, she told her to hurry up and pack her things. Daphne said the time had finally come. After all, after 4 years she would be returning to the capital. The wagon, which was on its way to the capital of the empire, was carrying the ducal couple, their guard Leon and the maid Marielle. Leon decided to start the conversation by saying that in about 3.5 hours the snowfield would be over, for he was beginning to see the horizon. Marielle still can't get used to the vibrant seasonality on the border, though she has been tirelessly observing it for the 4th year. Still, each sunset is unusual and beautiful in its own way. Marielle even wondered if it was the allure of the northernmost bay. Marielle asked the mistress if she agreed with her. The Duchess replied that she agreed with the maid. The colorful seasonality must be beautiful. She wondered how much money this sunset adds to the income from hot springs tourism. It had been a full 4 years since Daphne had moved to Bertrand's castle to the north. There had been so many events and changes in the intervening years. She had spent a lot of time in the library studying the history of the gods. On her first birthday in the Shadow Castle, she received a precious gift from Eggman. And the pair have grown quite a bit. Kale has grown much gentler towards her in that time, she thinks. Turning his gaze to Daphne, the Duke created an amusing situation by crossing his eyes with her. Turning to the young man, the princess asked if it wasn't beautiful. The embarrassed boy agreed, rubbing his neck at the same time. At one point, he even started laughing. The Duchess realized that it was still helpful to have special training, so it didn't look intimidating. She's very proud of herself. But the other two present realize that they look like newlyweds. They are going to the imperial palace for the mistress's coming-of-age ceremony. The coming-of-age ceremony is usually held on her birthday. But there was a reasonable question from Leon. After all, Madame's birthday has been a few months. And that was correct. Marielle explained that in fact, when the Duchess was in the imperial palace, she never celebrated her birthday. After all, no one in the palace was interested in that day. And even her maid didn't know about it until she came here. Leaning on her arm, Daphne said she didn't care. After all, this ceremony is only for the Emperor to find out if she is his chess piece. What will happen in the capital is not her ceremony, but rather, at this point the carriage wheel broke. The Duke inquired if it could be repaired, to which the coachman replied that it might be possible to find another wheel by going to the stables. One must pass through the woods ahead, but the sun had already set. But the only thing Kale wondered about was how far it was. The older man said that if they got there on horseback, they would get there quickly enough. In that case, the Duke would give him a guard and they would be on their way. The coachman was very grateful, so much so that he had for some reason decided that the Archduke would go with him, and the Archduke, hearing this, was downcast and said nothing against it. Turning to Leon, he told him that he would go with the coachman to fetch a wheel for the carriage. He remains to guard her ladyship. Some time had passed, and Leon said His Excellency was delayed. He thought they'd be quick. He didn't know if everything would be all right. The monsters are appearing even though the red moon hasn't risen in 4 years. Confident in his abilities, Leon had already asserted that even if someone came out, he, a knight, would just catch him out of boredom. Daphne, who was one of the first to notice their new friend, shuddered and asked if he would be bored with him. A werewolf appeared before her eyes. Just a werewolf, which made Marielle faint. Meanwhile, in the stables, the coachman had been unable to find even one suitable wheel for the second hour, although a similar one was attached to the carriage outside. The Duke, in this situation, nothing but a radical method could be adopted, demanded that the coachman take off the wheel, and off they went. In the meantime, Leon, against the werewolf, would have to work hard to overcome the boredom. Opening its mouth, the monster roared. Leon, standing opposite him, waited for the monster to swing. He aimed for its weakness at this very moment, but the monster was smarter than he was and intercepted the sword with his paw, throwing it away from its owner a decent distance. Not expecting this, the glorious knight wondered how that was. The beast swung its huge paw. The knight could only cover his face in helplessness. Daphne screamed with all her might. Then the monster stopped in place, immobilized, and Leon realized this was his chance to slaughter the thing. Tipping it to the ground, it was clear that it was as if the monster had been paralyzed. Swinging the spearhead, Leon pondered. The werewolf had appeared, though the red moon had not risen. This time, the Archduke must be informed. Calling for a man, the Duchess stepped out of the carriage. Noticing this, Leon, rubbing his head foolishly, asked if my lady had seen it too. After all, the attacking monster froze in an instant. As expected, Leon did well. Still, my lady demanded that he wipe the blood off his face first. At this time, she thought she was fine. Leon didn't feel anything strange. But the Duchess can confidently say that when she screamed, she felt the same as when she used the power of a god. Perhaps it had something to do with Daphne's god abilities. And yet, she hadn't seen any mention of her being able to control monsters. But she would only find out the details in the capital. A few days later, those assembled in the Palace of the Sun, one of whom was the Grand Duchess, said that it was not easy to get there from the north. Turning his full attention to the young man, the Emperor mentioned that he hadn't seen Archduke Bertrand in about a year. Kale agreed to this, and, as it is the first time he has come to the capital in a long time, the owner of the empire also hopes that he will linger. But the Archduke refused such hospitality. Still, he cannot leave his land for a long time. The Emperor coughed, saying that His Majesty's steadfastness was as great as ever. He asked if Sir Egmont could still defend. The Emperor was getting worse, but he continued talking and expressed his understanding, for the situation in the north is still very difficult. At this point, he hadn't spoken to his daughter in a while, so he asked the Archduke to return to the townhouse. The latter withdrew. When he was alone with Daphne, he asked the question that interested him most. Had not many stories accumulated in the meantime, and having answered him, the Duchess began her play. Sitting on her knees under the Emperor, she told him how he must have noticed that she had become close to the Duke. The Duchess tried very hard. The feigned tears flowed from her eyes, and Daphne asked if she was still his daughter. And she was, for His Majesty had adopted her. If he will also hear only good words in the future, then there is nothing to worry about. Suddenly, the Emperor asked if she wanted to call him father, and she wouldn't dare dream of it. Even though His Majesty brought Daphne to the palace, she doesn't forget her roots. It was all her game, and the Emperor's illness becomes much more noticeable, which means the beginning of the story is near. She has to keep her ear to the ground, playing the part of the naive pet, and until the Crown Prince is determined, she must act like Daphne from a past life. It seems to the Emperor that her speech is getting longer. Nevertheless, it seems to him that she has something to tell him. And she told him how on the day she lived in the palace, she had seen the dagger that had been given to Prince Claire. She longs greedily to keep at least one piece of jewelry that the Emperor will give her. It's such a silly thing for him to do, and after tearing off a piece of jewelry, he throws it into her hands. After all, it is enough, and she is grateful to him. She will treasure it. And now, at last, His Majesty said that the Duchess could also go to the townhouse. With a curtsy, she bowed out. As she left the study, she heard that the Emperor now had a meeting with the Duke of Kabilita. He is Flora's grandfather, on her father's side. Meeting him won't cause any problems, but he was Daphne's teacher in a past life, and that makes her uncomfortable. Better get out of here soon. And by the way, that throne brooch is bigger than she thought, and so disgusting as a piece of garbage. She even thinks the brooch stinks so bad she's about to vomit. She realized that the Emperor was a vile murderer. 4 years ago, she made a request to heirs, the head of the Ryan Guild. She asked me to find the person responsible for the fire at the orphanage, and just as she thought, it was Emperor Blake. It's so disgusting, but the brooch will be very useful. You could use it as a pass to get into any place. As she fixed her hair, she heard a sudden voice behind her. A harsh phrase about going to her death but coming back alive rolled off the man's tongue. The Duchess remembered this guy. He is the young Earl of Elmira. Approaching Daphne, he was saying how lucky he was. And Daphne remembered even more, for when Claire swung at her with the dagger he had received from the Emperor, his assistant stood behind him and laughed. Lady Marquise Elmira and he are the two contenders for the title of Marquis. The young Earl came even closer, saying that he just wanted to play something with the prince. Daphne thought, despite the fact that they belonged to the Elmira imperial faction, the Count's family was known for its vulgarity. An imperial brooch appeared before his gaze, which angered him, and he exclaimed why His Majesty's brooch was on her. The Duchess's face was expressionless at that moment, but she smiled with a snicker at this very moment. It was a matter of course for the Count to assume that Daphne had stolen the brooch. He pointed it out to her, not understanding how she had dared to touch His Imperial Majesty's things, whether fear was gone after the trip north. When Daphne heard that, she wondered if he was a fool, but she simply exhaled and told him not to make up such a thing, for the Emperor himself had given her the brooch. He realized that she had just addressed him informally. It certainly pissed him off, but couldn't she do it? They are, after all, originally of different social status. Daphne asked if he had forgotten that she was the Emperor's daughter, and on top of that, she said that he is only the son of an Earl, and if he didn't believe her, he could check it out. She has offered to go to the Emperor's waiting rooms, and he will ask. If he's right, her hands will be cut off at the wrist. But if her words are true, his tongue, that he despises the imperial family, will be cut off. Thinking she only wanted to scare him, the Count grabbed her wrist. He said they would come over and ask. Unable to see anything in front of him, young Elmire faced the Archduke. Raising his eyes to the man who was a head taller than him, the Count screamed in fear. The guy who was outside at the time laughed at something. He said that thanks to her ladyship, he was having a lot of fun seeing the sights. The next day, Prince Claire received a report of what had happened. Count Elmira had been expelled from the capital, and for the prince, the Emperor had left another message, the contents of which Claire was interested in. Continuing, the clerk explained the message. The Emperor said that the Count was kicked out for harassing the princess, causing a commotion. After the story was told, the servant cried out in shock. The prince was furious. Getting back at the guy, Claire said that he didn't put the one under him just to listen to such talk. The innocent servant stretched out words of apology, but it was no use, for the prince was annoyed with the commoner who would soon be left behind. A man standing also near the prince suggested to bother the princess. They'll plant a man in Bertrand's townhouse. In this way, they will find out about the movements of the Archduke and the princess. He will be able to tell the details at the coming-of-age ceremony, and if Claire hurries, she can find out the Archduke's dark intentions. After listening to his man, the prince gave the go-ahead, adding that he seemed to have a head on his shoulders. He would be sure to tell the prince the good news, and the servant who had hitherto bowed his head was still unable to say a word. Meanwhile, at Bertrand's townhouse, the letters that had come to the mistress after dinner were presented to Marielle. The maid said that as soon as the princess returned to the capital, the letters started pouring into her hands. She had changed a great deal in 4 years. Looking through one of the envelopes, Daphne thought about the reception at Cabalito's palace. That was odd. There should be no social events until the Duke met Flora. The Duchess made the decision to contact heirs. Just by mentioning the name of Ryun's head to himself, the earring glowed. It was a sign that a connection had been made. Daphne asked if there was any news that there was an aristocratic family in the capital who had found their lost granddaughter. The answer came immediately. There was no such news. But there was something more unpleasant. She should avoid the Duke as much as possible. Tossing aside the letter announcing the reception, Daphne told Marielle to burn everything but the invitation to Earl Coman's charity gala. And somehow, the envelope without a sender had caught the Duchess's attention. Daphne hadn't opened the envelope for that reason, but it felt like it was protesting about it. Reading the contents, the Duchess asked Marielle if an informer had been planted in their townhouse. 2 days later, in a house in the capital, Prince Claire's man listened to the report of an informer who said that at a certain moment, the princess was agitated, so she began to speak very softly. It was about 4 years since Archduke Bertrand had been to the temple. Rumor has it that the Archduke has allied himself with the temple and is usurping the throne, so he also took the opportunity at Count Coman's charity gala. At the reception, there will be an opportunity to get lost among the guests to have a meeting with the head priest Pakin of the temple from the outskirts of the capital. At the end, the informer asked if the customer was satisfied with the information. After all, the information was no more valuable than he had promised. He might want to know something else. Perhaps it really exceeded the subordinate prince's expectations. But before talking about money, he suggested that the informer try one thing, saying it was something aristocrats like to use. It was so expensive, he said, that in a lifetime of working in a townhouse, a servant would not be able to buy it. The commoner was delighted to be given such a jewel. The man opened the flask and drank without taking a sip, but he clutched his neck. A sharp pain pierced his throat, and he asked the appropriate question as to what the customer had given him. The man asked if he had told him. The prince's subordinate explained that it was a medicine that aristocrats like to use. They use it to get rid of useless trash. Watching from the sidelines, heirs turned to Daphne. She spoke of how they would no longer have to go to the snitch. The master of this man got rid of him. The words spoken by the Duchess sounded disappointed. She wanted to personally explain to them that in Bertrand County, traitors were summarily executed. The next day, Prince Claire was already discussing the information he had received with his brother. The Crown Prince said that the Archduke was outraged. This should not be taken lightly. Exhaling with worry, the Crown Prince said, "Daphne's coming-of-age ceremony is just around the corner." Prince Claire turned up his nose and said that this was their chance to take the opportunity to explain to the commoner her place. He can't even begin to comprehend how arrogant she's become since her trip to the north. Dared to accept the emperor's brooch, to accept his prestige along with it. While surrounded by pure-blooded aristocrats, she forgot about her lineage. The young man was unheardedly annoyed by this, and smirking, the Crown Prince asked what Claire was going to do about it. After hearing that the prince might have been punished, Claire immediately asked what he should do. He decided to go to the emperor without checking anything, but the Crown Prince would help by confirming his words. The imperial Crown Prince said to leave the matter to him. Filling out the scroll, The emperor asked about the authenticity of the information. Standing opposite, his heir vouched for the authenticity and added that Daphne knew about it, but did nothing about it. And that phrase was decisive. The emperor, upon request, has given the crown prince imperial knights to command, and only one requirement: not to betray his majesty's trust. The emperor's son, having gotten what he wanted, led the siege of Daphne's temple a few days later. During Earl Coman's charity gala, Haley Coman introduces herself to the Archduke. It was late, but she was excited to meet him. Earl Coman mentioned how much the Archduchess has grown. Daphne is immensely grateful for the invitation to the event. The Countess, who accepted the thanks, offered to show the auction items. While giving the tour, Haley explained that the proceeds would go to donate to temples and orphanages. Also, there are many particularly entertaining lots this year, which might interest the Archduchess. Stopping in front of the picture and presenting it, the Countess managed to attract the princess's attention. Examining the illustration, Daphne replied that the Countess, as expected, knew her well. At that moment, an elderly man whom Haley had introduced as the head priest of the temple, Father Pakin, approached them. The Countess also introduced the Archduchess, and the Archduchess introduced herself as Daphne Bertrand, a reverence for God's faithful servant. The priest replied, "All of God's grace at every turn," turning to Father Pakin. Thanks to the Archduchess, he is less worried about the lives of all the priests. Daphne said she was grateful to be able to help him. Turning his attention to the picture, the arriving man realized that they were looking at tapestries presented by their shrine. The priest explained that the first Emperor Blake receives a crown from the goddess Daphne. This constitutes a fateful meeting. Now, he asks permission to move on to the real story, saying that he has finished translating the writings that the Archduchess sent him. After listening to his story, Daphne asked if it was just a diary. The priest explained she wasn't wrong. It was about the adventures of the god Daphne with the first emperor and the first Archduke. She thought it was a great piece of writing to share with everyone, but it's just a story of people's lives. Pakin said, however, it was too early to be disappointed, because at the end it said that if you put all three stories together, spring would come back again. This information interested her. Meanwhile, the knights have gathered to lay siege to Daphne's temple. Their goal is to capture the traitors who dare to defy imperial authority. The unscrupulous traitors are Archduke Bertrand and High Priest Pakin. The blonde-haired youth demanded for the priest's judgment to capture Pakin alive. Maddened by Cale Bertrand's curse, Crown Prince Alan Blake execute him at once. Pakin said that the relationship between gods and demons was unknown. This is because the monster appeared right after the goddess Daphne left the human world for the last time. However, that's not to say that they are unaware of everything. There is a record that Daphne had excellent taming abilities. The knights turned to Alan, saying that they have searched everything in the temple, but Archduke Bertrand and the head priest Pakin could not be found. They assumed it was a false report, as the farmer and the watchman had said. The man said that the Archduke and the High Priest had not even corresponded. The Crown Prince assumed that some petty man dared to make a false accusation. Therefore, the fellow would punish him severely, and he would be graciously forgiven for this mistake. Alan figured Claire was working his head a lot. He knew how to muddy it with false information. The second prince didn't understand why he should even come to charity events. The butler told him to put his anger aside. Looking closer, the boy saw the face of Cale Bertrand. The young man shouted, asking what he was doing here. At this time, Daphne is meeting along with Duke Caballito on the lawn. The man was told that she would not be able to join the dinner, so he was lucky to see her before arriving at the estate. The princess replies that it was the circumstances. She realizes that he only came here because of her. That was always the case in her past life. She has learned a lot in the north. The girl asks what the Duke wanted to tell her. The man realized that she was, as expected, getting straight to the point. That's good, because he's going to be blunt. He asked the Archduchess to divorce the Archduke. If they divorced and she returned to the capital, he would adopt her. That's how she'll save her life. When she returns to the capital after the divorce, His Majesty will expel the defective princess. Then Duke Caballito will take an active role. The Emperor will move away from her as she will defame his name. Her divorce will be reason enough. Daphne refuses the man's proposal, thanking him for his concern. Perhaps he feels sorry for her. She assumes that he chose to act in this way because of compassion for his granddaughter, her age. If that was really true, then she was asking him to stop. If that were true, he should have opposed the emperor when she was adopted. The princess says she will take her own place, then asks who demands a divorce of her own volition. Her divorce is her decision. Meanwhile, Claire runs to Kale, asking why he's here. The Duke asks what's wrong, after all. He came by invitation to a charity gala. The prince yells that it's not funny. The Duke should have been plotting treason in the temple right now. The guests did not understand what the young man was saying. They whispered, saying that the prince had been making a lot of noise lately. A man approaches Claire, saying that the Archduke was with him all the time. The surprised heir asks who the man is. The butler runs up to His Majesty, asking him to calm down, because a mistake may be made now. The man explains that the man is Count Komen, the organizer of the charity gala. He is one of His Majesty's retainers. Claire says that the information he heard. The commoner was greatly disturbed that her husband was plotting treason. This Earl unequivocally gave accurate information. The young man's incomprehensible ramblings were interrupted by Kale. He said that if His Majesty ever said anything like that about his wife to a commoner again, he would really kill him, so Claire should watch his tongue. At this time, a carriage with its contents hidden by a cloth stopped in the streets of the capital. The coachman, who had gotten off his horse, abruptly tore off the sheet. He shouted, asking the emperor to look at his price for believing the people. Who had been chosen? From under the sheet, the limbs of the monster appeared, which greatly frightened those around him. Walking back to the count's estate, Daphne said that the conversation had been interesting. The Duke never thought he would feel so insulted. The commotion with Count Elmira was very exciting. The expression in her eyes as he looked at the imperial brooch. It was truly entertaining. The man said there would come a day when she would envy the distant past, and he was truly sorry. Walking back, Daphne heard shouts that a monster had appeared. She didn't understand why the monster was here. Kale tried to protect those present, not realizing where the princess was. The monster that was breaking into the building suddenly felt a rock slamming into his back. Turning around, he saw Daphne. She wondered if now was a good time.